Hello, everybody. Good evening, good day to everyone. I hope you're all doing great, and welcome to this latest episode of the Ask Abhijit show. Today, we discuss geopolitics. This is the second live stream I'm doing today. We're going to discuss geopolitics, but let's see first of all who all is there on the live chat with us this fine evening here. I can see I'm artistic, McLevin. Rashmi Rathore is heartbroken. What happened? What happened, Rashmi Rathore? What happened? Heartbroken? Not sure. Okay, let's see who else is there. Mystic SK, Sai Teja Reddy, Anonymous Scientist, The Knowledge Priest, Vikash PJ, Ameya Tulpule from Germany. Good evening. Rohit Kalita, Geopolitical Dubey from Indore, Beneath, Vinay Rai, Imatistic, Arpita Shukla, Shashank Kaushik, Hunter Kenway, Shreyas Mitra, Achal Verma, Avinash, Vladimir Putin, Ayush Singh, Vidhi Manyar, Srishti, Rohit Kalita, Advai, Vinay Rai, Pritesh Vakil, Priyansh, Shiv Brody, Adiruddh, Shashank Kaushik again, Shivasai, Saiteja Reddy, Avinash, Priyansh, David Swanson, Satellite. Who else do we have? We have Aditya, we have Patriotic, we have Godliness, Rishit Aghera, Baron Zemo, Somi Jain from Jaipur, Patriotic, the creator of existence is here. Well, is here. Achal Verma, Pritesh. Rashmi says, time पर नहीं जा पाई डॉक्यूमेंट्स वेरिफिकेशन के लिए जो हाथ में निकल गए. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that something has gone wrong with you, but I hope everything goes. I hope you were able to fix that. Ayush Singh bhi hai, Vikash PJ, Abhijit is here, Sobi Jain, the knowledge priest, Shreyas Mitra from Moscow. Srishti again, Polar Bear, Anant Pai, Yogesh Kumar, Dibakar World, Achal Verma, Abhinav Negi, Arjun, General Subutai, Shailesh Naik, Vikash PJ, and everybody else. Danush, Yogesh, Beneath, Jay Guman from Montreal in Canada, Raja Akash Kumar, and everybody else. All right. Okay, so let us. Beneath is from Siliguri. Good to see you, sir. Aditya and everyone else. Okay, we shall take a bunch of questions. Before that, I have a small announcement. In case some of you are not aware, I have finally started writing books. Finally started publishing. Writing a book takes a lot of time. It's a pretty arduous, tedious effort. It takes months or years. So what I'm doing is whatever I'm writing, I'm serializing the content and I'm putting out each chapter as an installment. So I'm writing a book on black holes. I think black holes are very mysterious, very interesting to a lot of people, but people don't know what black holes are. And black holes are explained in very scientific terminology. So I am writing about black holes in a way that everyone can understand. So one of these is about black holes. Here is the thing: dark stars to black holes. That's the first installment. It's out. It's come out about 48 hours ago. That's one that I'm writing, and another one is a series of short fiction supernatural stories based in Indian culture and civilization and mythology. So this is another one. These are all available on Amazon Kindle for now. Once I have published the entire series of chapters for the Black Holes book and a whole set of stories for this Mirrors of Maya series, then I shall have them published in hard copy format as well. But right now it's available on Amazon. So in case you're interested, please go ahead and acquire the books. If you read the books, please leave honest reviews. That will help me a lot. Help an Indian writer who is not mentally colonized and trying to do something good. All right, so that's the announcement. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's support. A lot of you have sent very, very nice messages in support. I really appreciate all of you. I can't respond to all of you individually, but thank you so much for all the support. It really means a lot to me. Now, with that said, let us get going with the questions that we have today. So I'll take super chat questions first of all. Let's see. We have Sai Teja Reddy who says, "Is Africa the next global battleground? Is Africa the next global battleground?" So Africa is not the next global battleground. There's gonna be competition in Africa when it comes to the major powers. The Americans and the French have historically been the major powers in Africa. The French in the Sahel region in West Africa. Americans, the United States has essentially vassalized the whole of Africa, either directly or indirectly. And the Chinese have been entrants in the past 15 or so, 15, 20 years in Africa in a variety of ways through their development projects, through their various port strategies, and so on. And Russia is also a participant in the geopolitical game in Africa. They are active in the Sahel region. Earlier, they were active through the Wagner Group, and now a little more directly. India, to some extent, is also there in Africa. So there is indeed a case for saying that Africa is a global battleground, and it is to a large extent a global battleground, but not the largest global battleground. The largest global battleground now is Eurasia, more actually Asia, because in Eurasia we have the Ukraine situation going on. The Americans wanted to essentially destroy Russia through the Ukraine conflict. It has not worked, and then the effort is now on from the American perspective to contain India. The containment efforts towards China have already been going on for some time. Now the objective is to contain India as well. So actually, it's Asia, it's the Indian Ocean region, the so-called Indo-Pacific region that is the larger battleground. But Africa is also a battleground, which will and it will be contested between the United States, to some extent France, perhaps to a little bit, and also China and Russia, and to some extent India. Godliness says, for the Indian state, after so much abuse, open support to Pakistan, 50% tariffs, no trade deal, choking India like China on semiconductors, equals to comprehensive global strategic partnership. I'm not sure what's the angle of the Indian state there, but okay, let's talk about this. You're talking about the India-US relationship, obviously. So, Mr. Trump, a couple of days ago, he said a few nice words, right? Indian media has reported and covered that extensively. The nice things that Trump said in response to someone's question during a press interaction. So he said that, India is a friend of ours, and I have got great friendship with Prime Minister Modi, and that sort of thing. A few nice words, briefly, he said. And he also, and this was reported in the media, and Prime Minister Modi responded immediately to that, saying that we value the US partnership and we look forward to continuing that. Something to that effect. Prime Minister Modi said something nice in a diplomatic way immediately. So all this time, the past few months, it's all been a barrage of abuse from Trump and his minions and from the Trump regime, right? Aimed at Prime Minister Modi, aimed at India, because India has refused to cave in. Prime Minister Modi has refused to make India a US vassal. And all this abuse kept coming towards India, and Prime Minister Modi kept quiet. He stayed silent about this. Mature silence. Don't respond to provocations. The moment Mr. Trump said something kind of nice, Mr. Modi responded immediately to that. So I think that's very mature diplomacy from Prime Minister Modi. But is it that now there is going to be a truce between India and the US? Is there now going to be an off ramp given to India and everything is going to be back on track? Absolutely not. And a lot of Indian commentators have jumped to the conclusion that yes, a new phase has started. India and the US are now going to be friends again. There's going to be a truce. There's going to be some kind of a phase of better relations, and Trump and Modi are friends again. That sort of thing. That is incredibly, staggeringly naive. I mean, I don't have the words to describe how naive Indians are. A few throwaway words of flattery, and Indians are dancing on the streets. Yes, everything is fine again. Extremely naive analysis, very naive behavior, very childish behavior. That's how easy Indians are to fool. Okay, so the relationship hasn't changed. The US priority is now going to be to contain India, a containment policy, a set of strategies aimed at containing India, and that's going to continue. Pakistan, the US is going to support Pakistan essentially to the hilt. Okay, Mr. Trump himself is personally invested in Pakistan. His business empire is invested in Pakistan. And then there's the 50% tariffs, and there's no trade deal, and there's the demand that we open up our market entirely to the US, including the agricultural sector, everything, which will essentially destroy India's industries if we do that, right? So that's the situation. And there's the geopolitical angle also. We Indian analysts like to speak about the Chinese string of pearls. They've been speaking about this for the past 20, 25 years. The Americans are constructing a ring of thorns around India. There is East Pakistan, there is West Pakistan. Both are US vassals. East Pakistan, Bangladesh is now going to send apparently troops to Ukraine, so they will get the training to fight, and then they will come back to Bangladesh, and that will in the future possibly, potentially, if required, be deployed against India. Right? So India is being encircled. East Pakistan, West Pakistan, the situation in Myanmar, the project K, Cookie Land for Christ project that the Americans have set off. Yeah, that's also, has it stopped? Has it stopped at all? So that's the situation. So the relationship has not changed. Those who are saying that Trump has said some nice words and Mr. Modi responded, it means that everything is back on track. That is so incredibly immature. That's what we have to remember. Words don't matter. Actions only matter. A few nice words doesn't make any difference. Ritik Power is asking a question from history now. Who are the top 5 greatest military commanders in the past 10,000 years history? Listen, we are discussing geopolitics, sir, today. This episode is a geopolitics episode. We're going to discuss geopolitics. So let's stick to geopolitics, please. If I start taking history questions and other questions, then the people who have come here to see geopolitics, to understand geopolitics, because I've said this is a geopolitics episode, I'll be doing them a huge disservice by taking questions from outside of geopolitics. So I apologize, but I will only take questions about geopolitics today. Apologies, Ritik Ji. Please, sir, let's do geopolitics today. ICMBs says, what can India do differently to better leverage soft power, literacy, media, culture, specifically in Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, even the West? What can India do differently? What I'll tell you India should do differently. Focus on hard power. Indians have this obsession with soft power. We need to develop our hard power. Soft power means a big fat zero if you have no hard power. Please understand this. Please, every day wake up in the morning and remind yourself, soft power is zero if you don't have hard power. I don't care about soft power right now. What India should do internally is a lot. We need to prioritize our culture, our civilization. Literacy. We are a nation of literate people who can sign their names and who can read and write. Is that literacy? For proper literacy, we have to reform the education system. Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's clear. Media, well, the Indian media is a bunch of vassals who parrot the Western speaking lines or the talking points given to them by whoever master they serve. Is there an Indian perspective in the Indian media? If you see the coverage of the Ukraine war, the first 2 years, the first 2 years especially, it was simply they'll go and read something from the Western media and then they'll parrot that in Hindi or whatever language, essentially portraying the West as the the side that is on the right side, and the Russians as the aggressors. The media, it needs to look. Media essentially is a paid media, okay, more or less. I'm sure there are some media houses that are completely, entirely, beautifully independent, but most media is just propaganda. It's all narrative. Culture, we need to do a lot about culture. If you really want to talk about soft power, India has the potential to be a tourism superpower, a cultural superpower. Culture brings in tourism. What are we doing about it? The city of Bangkok gets more visitors, foreign visitors, than the whole of India. France, Spain, Mexico, these countries get like 10, 20, 30, God knows how many times more foreign visitors than India, tourists. We can do so much. We can do a lot. There's a lot we can do. But first, let's focus on hard power. Hard power is what? Economic and military power, nothing else. Abhishek says, why is the government not investing in servers, building data centers? Oh, I think only the government can answer. See, data is very important. Technological sovereignty is critical to India, to any nation like India who wants to stand on its own and not cave in and become a vassal of the US. So if you don't want to become an American vassal, then you need to be sovereign in all important sectors. Economic sovereignty, we have it. Military sovereignty, we have it. Uh, when it comes to legislative and policy sovereignty, we have it. When it comes to sovereignty over your territory, we have it. But what about technological sovereignty, where everything depends on the West? Huge issue that the government needs to look into very seriously. Of course, the government is taking action. We have the semiconductor project going on, the semiconductor mission. We're going to be producing our own chips that may be 15 years behind the cutting edge today, but we got to start somewhere. So I appreciate that and I applaud that. But we need to be completely self-reliant in everything. We need to have our own social media that will allow the country to stay in touch with the people, with each other. We need to have our own social media apps. We need to have our own, all of this. The entire technological stack needs to be entirely indigenous, because you can't rely on foreign powers and what they give you, right, for their own purpose and for their own benefit. So the government needs to look into this, and there needs to be a comprehensive mission for this. So I agree with you, sir. Teen Talks Dharma says Putin and Xi talking about immortality. Well, I am I really are they? I haven't seen that, sir. I haven't seen any piece of news that says that they are now planning to become immortal. Don't know about that. Okay. Anonymous Scientist says forecast for India-US relations and purchasing your ebooks. First of all, thank you so much for that. Thank you. Forecast for India-US relations. It's no longer going to be a strategic partnership. Look, after what the Americans did in the wake of Operation Sindoor, all strategic trust has evaporated. Whatever little strategic trust existed towards the US from India is gone. It's gone. It's very clear that the US is not a reliable friend, ally, partner, whatever you want to call it. Strategic partnership. What strategic partnership when you are aiding and abetting India's number two enemy, Pakistan? What strategic partnership? What they want is a slave. What they want is a nation like India becoming a Japan. That sort of thing. That's what they want. The Americans are the same people as the British, aren't they? The British had the East India Company. Now the Americans want to create a East India Company 2.0. That's what they want to do. And the US now realizes that it's very clear that the Indian economy is going to keep growing. No matter what happens, there's zero chance of recession, which means that in 20 years' time, India could be a 10, 15, God knows what trillion-dollar economy. And at that scale, a nation like India, from the US perspective, is a threat. So they want to ensure this doesn't happen, which means that they will do everything it takes to contain India and to hamper India's growth and progress, and do everything it takes to fragment India, to fracture India, create all kinds of divisions in India. Whatever divisions the British have left behind, they will augment the divisions, and they will want to de facto balkanize India. So that is the forecast for the India-US relationship. It's going to be a very rough period. The US is no longer going to act as at least even pretend to act like a friend. I don't care what few words are said here and there. Oh, we are friends and we've got a great relation. Who cares about the words? What are your actions? Only the actions matter. So the forecast for the India-US relationship is that the US is going to continue its policy and strategy, multiple set of strategies to contain India. And it's going to be tough for India as a consequence. Amisha says, can GST reforms offset the impact of Trump's tariffs? Well, it certainly is possible. See, first of all, India and the US, we don't have the biggest trade relationship. We don't export a lot to the US. What, 90, $100 billion a year? That's not a whole lot in the larger scheme of things. And India apparently has a trade surplus with the US, which means that we export more than we import from the US. So we are we are the net beneficiaries, essentially. That's what it means. Now, if the US is imposing 50% tariffs, it means that it will be very hard for India to export stuff to the US, goods to the US, and that's going to cause problems. So the volume of goods and services we export to the US, volume in US dollar terms, will reduce. That's the obvious implication of that. So what do we do then? So if we want to become a manufacturing power, which is very important, we will have to look for alternative markets. Maybe the EU market, maybe Russia, maybe something else. We'll have to look into this. The other alternative is that we become a consumption driven economy. We manufacture for ourselves, for our own population, 1.4 billion people. We have a lot of people who need a lot of goods, services, whatever, consumer items, whatnot. We manufacture for our own economy, for our own population. That can boost the economy, right? As long as somebody is buying what's being manufactured, whether it's outside India, inside India, doesn't matter. The GDP grows, the economy grows, it gets stronger, more robust. So you can do that by becoming a consumption driven economy. But for that, you need to boost the spending power of your population. And the simplest way to do it is to have tax reforms. And that's exactly what is being done. Excellent. So it can, to some extent, depending on how it is done and to what extent it is done, it can significantly, definitely offset to some extent at least the impact of Trump's tariffs. So yeah, it's the logical step to take, and it's being taken. Excellent. Priyansh, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. Geopolitical Dubey says, will the US ever let Venezuelan oil come into the market? Well, as long as the Venezuelans refuse to become American vassals, they will do everything to prevent Venezuela from selling oil to the rest of the world. See, take the example of Iran. India is to buy oil from Iran. Then the US came in the way and said that India can no longer buy oil from Iran. If you want us not to sanction you, and if you want us to be your friends, you have to immediately stop buying oil from Iran. And because of that, India stopped buying oil from Iran, and that caused a lot of friction in the India-Iran relationship. Iran is not an enemy power of India. India and Iran should actually be good friends, allies, not allies as such, but partners, right? We don't have any issues as such, right? But the US came in the way, and that kind of soured the Iran relationship. And the Americans have prevented a lot of countries in the same way from buying oil from Iran. So Iran's major export market is China right now, right? And very few other countries are allowed to buy oil from Iran. So the Americans can do exactly the same thing to Venezuela, and I'm sure it's being done right now. And right now, Venezuela is under military pressure from the US. So yeah, that's the situation. So how can Venezuela end this problem? By becoming an American vassal, by having a regime change and installing a pro-US puppet in the country, and then opening up their oil sector to the US, and the US will benefit and profit from that. That's what the Americans want. The Americans want to control the entire world's flow of energy. You see, that's the thing. Mansak says, should Indians be soft boycotting American products, movies, shows till the tariff thing is over, or while only using necessary stuff like Google, etc.? I would say I would not recommend any such thing, boycotting and all. First of all, it doesn't work unless the whole country is united. Nothing works like that. And it's up to you. It's entirely up to you. If you don't like what the Americans are doing, you make your own decisions. I will make no recommendation as such. Yeah. Because the penetration is anyway so deep, so it really doesn't make any difference until we become technologically a sovereign nation. But I would say it's up to every individual Indian to decide what is best from their perspective. If you feel that the US is being extremely oppressive and trying to act like a colonial power, just like the British again, then yeah, you can make your decision. Aditya, thank you very much, sir. Sai Teja Reddy says, can Japan rearm constitutionally? No. No. And even if they change the constitution, they will not be allowed to change it. If some prime minister or some leader wants to change the constitution, even one word, something will happen to them. And the whole country is under US occupation. More than 120, 130 permanent US military bases on Japanese soil. Their entire economy is controlled by the Americans. Their foreign policy, military policy is controlled by the Americans. They can't take any major decision without consulting the US, the American generals who rule the country. Japan can't do anything. No. ICMBs says, is it fair to compare the Roman Republic with the US? Not the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire. See, if you look at, this is not really a historical question. It's a comparison which is valid and fair if you are discussing geopolitics. So the history of Rome, you can say, is roughly, you can divide in three parts. One is the Roman kingdom, second is the Roman Republic, and third is the Roman Empire. The Roman kingdom was this small kingdom that Rome had. Then the Roman Republic is when Rome becomes powerful, and it is run by a group of people, the Senate, old guys who are very powerful and very rich, nobles. And that was the Roman Republican period. And that ends essentially with Julius Caesar and Augustus. Julius Caesar was the last great figure of the Republican time, and then you have Augustus, who becomes the first emperor. So it is not really correct to compare the Roman Republic with the US. The Roman Empire, absolutely, because the US is an empire, and it behaves exactly the way the Roman Empire used to behave from a 21st century perspective, not from a 100 AD perspective, but from a 21st century perspective. The same patterns apply. So yes, it is indeed fair to compare the Roman Empire, or any empire for that matter, with the US, because the US is an empire. It's an autocracy masquerading as a democracy. It's a two-party system, just one step above a one-party system, and its behavior is entirely imperial in nature. Okay, godliness has some context to offer to the previous question. Okay, in the most recent tweet, Prime Minister Modi termed our relationship with the US as comprehensive global strategic partnership. This categorization of the relationship seems wrong. This is a diplomatic statement, sir. It's a diplomatic statement. In diplomacy, you use nice words, and the words don't matter. You have to be polite, you have to be courteous, you have to say the right things, but at the end of the day, you do what is right for your country. We should not take offense with so and so word was used and that word was not used, or we were not stronger and we did not give a more robust response. Words don't matter. Please repeat to yourself before you go to sleep, and first thing in the morning. Words don't matter. Only actions matter. What has India's actions been? We have refused to cave into the US. We have refused to accede to the demands to become a vassal, to open up our economy and just do everything they want. Those are the actions that we are taking. Words don't matter. Look at the actions. That's all. Daily Dose of Gaming says recent rumors about tariff or tax on IT. My take. Let them tax. Let them put a tariff on IT exports from India to the US. It's going to hurt their companies, because all their Fortune 500 companies and other companies, their entire tech sector depends on Indians, on Indian IT services. If they want to impose tariffs on that, feel free to do it. It'll hurt our tariff sector. It'll be very damaging for their Fortune 500 companies. I'm sure they can afford to pay more as tariffs, because who pays tariffs? It's not India that pays tariffs. It is the importer who pays tariffs. If I'm a Fortune 500 company and I'm getting services worth, let's say, $1 million in a month from India, and if, let's say, Trump imposes 50% tariffs, it means that every time I get $1 million worth of services from India, I have to pay $500,000 to the US government. The importer, the American company. The Indian companies don't pay tariffs. So if they want to, if Trump wants to do it, let him do it. It'll hurt the US. I would say go ahead and end the H-1B system also, the visa system. I think India should say, we are ending ourselves the H-1B visa system. We require that all H-1B visa holders immediately come back to India within 7 days' time. Then see what happens. Chaos in the US. Teen Talks Therma says, if the US has military bases in many countries due to its victory in the Second World War, but today no other country can do that. So how can one surpass the US military might, the US in military might? The US took the fullest advantage of its victory in the Second World War. It's the hegemony it established over Western Europe, and they expanded it by through the Bretton Woods Accord, and making the US dollar the global currency, the reserve currency. And they also, at that time, were in physical occupation of Japan, military occupation. They continued that. The Korean War gave them another advantage. They were able to occupy South Korea, which is still under occupation. And nations like Germany, Italy, etc., remain under US occupation since the Second World War ended. And the US, over time, it expanded its footprint by doing this series of bilateral acts with lots of countries, which essentially vassalized those countries with the reward that, we will offer you military protection whenever required. And it created NATO. It engineered the EU, and that's how it has been able to expand its global power projection capabilities, economically, militarily, in other ways, politically, in so many different ways. So today the situation is that the US has more than 700 extraterritorial military bases across the world. No other country can do that. So how can one surpass the US in military might? So you can surpass the US in military might, but it will be difficult to surpass them in power projection. You can develop new technologies that will, let's say your country develops a new technology, military technology, set of technologies that dwarfs the capabilities of the US, right? So then you become locally super powerful, and then slowly you can use that might to expand outwards by creating vassals around you. So it's a process that happens over time. Let's say, let's say hypothetically, India develops some superb technology, antimatter technology. Let's say we power all our vehicles through antimatter, and all our military weapons have antimatter warheads. Hypothetical, completely science fiction scenario. That is more powerful, potentially, definitely more powerful than nuclear weapons, and it gives you unlimited energy if you can generate, if you can produce enough antimatter. All hypothetical. So with that kind of power that nobody can defeat you, let's say then India decides that we will replace the vassalization of Pakistan by the US by making Pakistan our vassal. And we do the same thing with East and West Pakistan, and we start expanding our footprint outwards that way. So it takes time, right? It's possible, but it will take time. It may take 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but for that, one nation will have to develop technology that is way more powerful than anything the US has. It is always technology that is the game changer. Somebody earlier in the previous live stream today asked me, how did the Vikings become a force suddenly in Europe? They were nowhere. What happened? Technological innovation. It's always technology. So any country can, through technological innovation, surpass the US in might. But then you will have to work on your power projection capabilities, which is a different story, which also will be much easier if you have more might. So that's how it goes. Ritvik Yaduvanshi says, as the US is a continuation of the British Empire, why would they push migrant influx harming their own land of origin, UK and Europe? Is the West heading towards civil unrest or even civil war as tensions rise? Look, the US is a continuation of the British Empire. It snatched the crown from London and replaced and took it to Washington. And now they look at the UK as a vassal, as a substandard, second rate, third rate world power, which is a vassal of the US. So you can do whatever you want to your vassal, even if they're your own people. It doesn't matter if they're their own people, right? And the US fought the UK for its independence. So they still have that we're gonna one up you every time. We're gonna show you who's the boss. We are the same people, but we are the boss now. And the UK, you guys, you stay down. You are our vassals. Everyone else, all the Anglo countries, Canada, Australia, everybody is second grade compared to us. We are the top dog, and we will show you how things are done. Right? And if required, we'll ruin you. So that's how it goes. There is no ethnic loyalty or any such thing. Is the West heading towards civil unrest or even civil war as tensions arise? It's possible. If your country, if your demographics are being replaced by invaders, the invasion is being engineered by a foreign power, which is Brussels in Europe. So let's say you are a hypothetical European nation who is part of the EU, and Brussels is 1,000 kilometers away, but Brussels decides what happens in your country, and you do not elect the people in Brussels. They don't represent you. They are your overlords, and they are pushing immigration into your country. It's possible that tensions will rise and there could be civil war, and people could revolt possibly. It's possible. Europe may perhaps potentially, hypothetically, head in such a direction. Entirely possible. Prashant says, our royal family is symbolic or do they impact geopolitics? I mean, which royal families are we referring to? The UK's royal family, it doesn't really matter as far as we know, right? The UK is a vassal of the US. The UK doesn't matter. Which other royal families? The European royal families, how do they matter? They're completely insignificant and immaterial. No, they don't matter. In geopolitics, what matters is who really holds power. Where is the real center of power in each bloc? The Western bloc, the Eastern bloc, or every country. So When it comes to the entire Western world, which is the US plus NATO plus EU plus Australia, New Zealand, plus now Japan and South Korea, also part of the Western world because they're under occupation. When it comes to the Western world, there's only one center of power, which is Washington. All your little royal families and all, they don't matter. The real power is in Washington. Now, it is said that Washington has a deep state. So that is the real power then, the deep state, the power that really controls the US and its economy and all that. Not the president. The president is just for show. And in case some people believe that the deep state is controlled by some other foreign country, then that's where the power lies. I'm just saying hypothetically. So royal families don't really matter today, unfortunately, for them. For them. In India, the royal families anyway don't matter. Ashish Karan says, how can Japan, South Korea de-vassalize? Feels impossible. It's more or less impossible. They can de-vassalize only if the US decides to release them, which the US obviously won't decide. There's no way they de-vassalize unless they find some incredible science fiction technological breakthrough that can free them of foreign occupation, which is extremely unlikely. So very hard to see this happening. So I agree with you. Very hard. Feels impossible. Raj Rahul, oh, thank you. No question, but thank you so much. Appreciate that. Shailesh Naik says, can India take control of the Strait of Malacca? Well, we can, but then there'll be a pushback, right? Okay, let's take a look at the map so that we understand what we are discussing. We have the naval might to take control of it, but the question is, if we do that, then what's the consequences of that? See, this is the Strait of Malacca. This here. This passage of water. It's called the Malacca Strait. And most of the world's shipping between east and west passes through the Malacca Strait. Whatever energy is imported by China, it passes through the Malacca Strait. So if you want to choke China hypothetically, then then India can hypothetically blockade this strait using the Indian Navy, and that can cause immense problems, not just for China but for the West also, and so on. Because of it'll block the transportation of goods from Asia to the West and so on. So it'll cause immense problems. So now let's say, certainly we hypothetically can blockade it if we want to. We can send 20 Indian naval warships and a bunch of submarines to blockade this place. So nobody can pass through. It can be done. But then what is the consequences of that? We have to look beyond the first order scenario. If we do that, the Chinese will send their navy to the Malacca Strait to face off against the Indians and to clear the Indian blockade. Now, the Chinese navy is way more powerful than Indian navy. Do you know that? Then what do we do? Have you thought about that? And if we blockade the Strait of Malacca, first of all, will the Americans agree to it? They will not agree to it. They will say, you are trying to become a big power. Now we will do something about this. They will send 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to threaten the Indian Navy. Then what do you do? So look, hypothetically, we can take some action, but let's say we blockade the Strait of Malacca, or let's say we can't take control of it because it passes through Indonesia. To take control of the Strait of Malacca, you have to take control of Indonesia, which we don't want to do. So we can't take control of it. We can blockade it, but then there's going to be consequences which will not be nice. So until you become such a powerful nation that nobody can challenge your blockade, there's no point doing it. Do you understand? Kingston Crystal says, will we ever spread our culture and religion like the West? See, our culture is not the kind of culture or religion that spreads the way the Western religions, Abrahamic religions, are spread through the sword. We don't do that. So, yeah, we will not do it that way. And it doesn't look like we're in a position to do it anyway right now. Anonymous Scientist says, should India mediate Russia, Ukraine if both agree? I think we should. Show Trump his place. Putin doesn't trust Trump. Zelensky is Trump's puppet, but he's also trying to be as independent as possible. And Trump is not going to be able to bring forth a ceasefire unless it is in Putin's interest to have a ceasefire. And Putin doesn't need a ceasefire right now. He's perfectly fine with the way the war is going. He's perfectly fine with that. It is going as per his plans, right? This slow grinding war. Who is it hurting? Is it hurting Russia? If you believe the propaganda coming from the West, like 700 million Russian soldiers have died or some nonsense like that, or 1 million, how do they get these numbers? Huh? The war is working exactly the way Russia wants. Now, let's say Putin wants a ceasefire, but he doesn't want to do it through Trump. Then maybe India can get involved in that. So I think in the future, if a ceasefire does happen at some point in the future, maybe it may be India that's involved rather than the US. Right? It's possible. So if there's the opportunity, I would say that yes, India should mediate in this crisis. Indeed. Ajinkya Pawar says a very interesting question. No one asks this talks about the space race, right? These days. What's currently going on in the space race? Okay. What's currently going on? Which are the major space powers in the world right now? We have the US. Yeah. We have Russia. We have China. We have India. We have the EU, which is mainly France. We have Japan to some extent. Have I missed somebody? I guess not. And in the US, you again have multiple powers, which is one is NASA or the United Launch Alliance or whatever it is. The second is SpaceX. And if you look at the whole global order of scheme of things, SpaceX is the predominant player in the space race today. Right? They launch rockets like every week. The amount of payload they can launch in a year it dwarfs all the other nations put together. So the US is the undisputed leader of the space race. There's a huge distance between SpaceX and everybody else, huge gap. When it comes to the other nations, Russia has very robust space launch capabilities. So Russia is a powerful player in the space race. They have powerful rockets, very reliable rockets, and they don't have a space station. They don't seem to have very ambitious plans of. Do the Russians have a plan to send humans to the moon? They probably do, but they perhaps may do that in cooperation with China, possibly. China is very ambitious, and China's space launch capabilities are pretty good, very good, actually excellent. They've got very good rockets, which hardly fail, and the payload capacity is pretty strong. There's Japan, which is a pretty good space program, but it's a vassal nation, so it doesn't really matter because it's controlled by the US. And you have the EU, which again is controlled by the US. They have the Ariane rocket system, which is a pretty, very, very, very robust and very reliable rocket system. And then you have ISRO, right? Now, I've said this in the past that the two or three nations that will lead the world in the space race, in space exploration capabilities, will be the two or three nations that will decide the future of humankind. The question is, where is India in all this? We have ISRO, we have the PSLV, which is the tiny little rocket compared to everybody else. Okay, I'm not trying to disparage the achievements of our engineers and scientists. It's an excellent rocket, but its payload capacity is minuscule compared to what other countries have. Now, can ISRO scientists not develop a rocket that's 20 times more powerful? We have the GSLV or the LMV Mark whatever, which is a augmented version of the GSLV, which is more powerful with a higher payload capacity than the PSLV. We have that, but once again, it is dwarfed by what the Chinese have, the Russians have, and the Europeans have, and the Americans have. So, our scientists, our engineers are capable of developing in, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, a rocket that's of the same order of magnitude as the SpaceX most powerful rockets. We have all the talent, we have all the know-how, we have all the manpower we need, all the brains we need, but where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the ambition? Let's say I'm an engineer in ISRO. I want to make the most powerful rocket in the world. I have the ambition. I have that hunger inside me. That fire burns in me. But I am an engineer in ISRO. I don't control the budget. I don't decide what happens. I take orders from my superior and I do what I'm told. And my boss will take orders from somewhere else. So the ambition needs to come from the political level, the leadership of India. Right? I would want to see India as one of the top two space powers. It's very important. People don't understand what's there in rockets. Who needs all this? If we did not even have the PSLV, GSLV, would we have all the satellites that we have in space right now? Without the satellites, we are blind. Without the satellites, we could not have won the Operation Sindoor war. We need way more capabilities than what we have right now. Eventually, the Americans will start issuing visas for the moon and for Mars. Then what will you do? Then we will be stuck here, and the Americans will expand across the solar system. Our descendants, our children will be stuck on the planet, which by that time could be a very different planet. So we need to augment our space flight capabilities. We have this Gaganyaan coming up. I don't know what the deal is. When is the first flight happening? There's going to be a couple of experimental flights, and before this, a human space flight and so on. It's very slow, tedious, snail space progress. Very disappointing. Very disappointing. India should be one of the top two powers in space, and we have everything we need to make it happen. But there seems to be a lack of political will and ambition. That's what I would say. Nova Spark says someone was saying months back that Modi and Trump would dance hand in hand, and that's how I saw the US India relation. What went wrong? Failed prediction. First failed prediction. Yes. So I had said that there is a high possibility that India and the US will dance hand in hand. What did I mean by that? It meant that India could become a US vassal. And we have not become a US vassal. I would say, my highest regards to Prime Minister Modi, right? To stand up to the US. Because when I had said, whenever it was, November, December, whatever, that there's a significant chance that India and the US will be dancing hand in hand. What I meant by that is that there's a high likelihood that India will become a US vassal. And that's not happened. So incredible. I'm so proud of the Prime Minister and the government for standing up to the US, right? Yeah, so I had said that, and it's not happened, and I am super happy it's not happened. All right? I'm sure you find it funny. It's okay. Pavan Shri Harsha says, your videos have been a blessing to me. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. The US is vacating its foreign bases and is confining to its region. Does this benefit China? The US seems to be in a state of retreat, strategic retreat, right? It is trying to reimpose the Monroe Doctrine in the Americas region, which is North and South America. Right now, it's trying to coerce Venezuela through military threats and so on. And so, is the US vacating its foreign bases? I think it is consolidating its hold on its own region. It is the US is feeling that the Chinese and the Russians have, and perhaps India also with them, will cause a certain kind of shift in the balance of power in the Eurasia region or in the Asia region. So maybe now, because of this coming shift, we need to consolidate our stronghold on what we occupy and our region, our hemisphere of the world, let's say, which is the Americas, the Western Hemisphere, and Europe, and so on. So they are kind of taking actions in that direction. Does this benefit China? Well, the US is not withdrawing from Eurasia, from the Asia Pacific region. The US is not giving up a single military base that it has in Japan. It has more than 120 military bases. It's not giving up a single one of those. It's not giving up a single base in South Korea. It is not giving up the vassalage it has in various countries in the region, Southeast Asia region, Eastern Asia region. It's not giving up any of that. So it's not really withdrawing. It's not really vacating its foreign bases. The French have vacated their bases in the Sahel region of Africa. So the French have executed a retreat, a genuine retreat. The French presence in Africa, military presence in Africa is over now. The French have done that. So you can see overall, from a macro Western perspective, the West is kind of retreating to some extent. Does this benefit China? Not quite yet. Because if you look at China, it is still very much encircled by US bases and US forces, the three island chains and whatnot. So it's too early to say that it benefits China. The US is not vacating any of those bases. It's not giving up any of the island chains. So it doesn't really make any difference at this point in time to China. If the US does, for some reason in the future start vacating some of the bases, maybe some South Korean bases or Japanese bases, that would be huge advantage to China if that happens, but I don't see that happening. So that's the situation right now. Feels Strong Man says, you mentioned about great men theory in my most favorite episode of Abhijit, Chavda, Genghis Khan, and Alexander Great. Uh, yeah, beer biceps. Okay, that episode. Do you subscribe to this idea? Can you elaborate and please do one more episode? We can do one more episode if you like, if that's what everyone wants. What is this great men theory? And I mean, it's one of the theories that seeks to explain how historical and geopolitical change happens, right? So there are various ways of looking at the world. One is the Marxist perspective. The Marxist perspective doesn't believe in the great man theory. The Marxist perspective says it is the workers of the world. It is the great united proletariat that makes the change in the world. Marxist revolutions and all that stuff. And individuals don't matter. That's the Marxist perspective. But the great man theory says that all major change in world history has happened through the actions of a small number of great men. Major change, not small changes here and there, little minor changes, major changes. For example, Alexander is said by the West to have changed the course of history of the world. Right? One man and his conquests. He destroyed Persia. He destroyed Persia. He destroyed the greatness that Persia had. The Achaemenid dynasty was ended by Alexander, and Persia was reduced to a shell of what it used to be. All its treasures were plundered by Alexander. All the gold and silver was taken and melted away. All the books and libraries were destroyed and burned. Nothing was left. So yeah, huge change. And so Alexander is one of the great men that they talk about. There are other great men. Julius Caesar, no question about the fact that Julius Caesar single-handedly changed the course of history in Europe. Right? He single-handedly was the cause of the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the imperial period of Rome. It would not have happened without the conquests that he did. He conquered Gaul, which is today's France. He conquered Iberia, which is today's Spain. He conquered. He was the first Roman to conquer parts of Britain. He was not content with that. He went and conquered Greece. Then he went and conquered Egypt, and so much more. So one man had such a huge impact on creating this whole empire, right? For setting up the structure that would become the Roman Empire. Then you have Genghis Khan. One man single-handedly changed the course of history in Asia, right? And what he did still has repercussions today. And so many examples, even in Indian history, Chandragupta Maurya, Ashok, various Gupta emperors, the Cholas, Rajraj and Rajendra Chola, they changed the course of world history. So if you look at the patterns, you will see it's always some. Then there's Napoleon. There is in Turkey Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. In Russia there's Stalin, and so on. So if you look at history, it's you will see there are these individuals that come up at various points in history, and through the sheer force of their personality and efforts and their achievements and their deeds, they take the world by the scruff of its neck and change the course of history. So yeah, there is a significant amount of truth, the way I see it, to the great man theory. So yeah, I would say that to some extent I do subscribe to this idea. Yeah, it's not and who is a great man? A great man is typically a product of the culture that he grew up in. So culture also obviously makes a difference. When it comes to India, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, great example of a great man who changed the course of history. He laid the foundations for what would become the Maratha Empire, which destroyed the Turkic stronghold over India, right? So one man laid the foundation for what would become the Maratha Empire. So you have this happen over and over again in history, and that is something that's undeniable. Of course, there are other perspectives, but yeah, overall, I would say that to a significant extent, it's true. Arun says, no hate, but Praveen Mohan is debunked by Indian rationalists and historians. Is literally saying 200 years carbon dating as 2000 years supporting him. Blah, 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 blah. So we are discussing geopolitics here. We are discussing geopolitics here. It's okay. You don't have to believe in Praveen Mohan or anybody else. You don't have to believe in me also. It's okay. I am not a rationalist, by the way. I'm not a rationalist. I'm a realist. Rationalism is idiocy. The Indian rationalists are a bunch of crackpots, many of them. Not all. I'm sure there are brilliant ones among them. But this whole rationalism business is all about essentially being anti civilization and anti culture. And I'm not one of these Indian rationalists, right? It's up to you, sir. Anyway, back to geopolitics. Let's not, please see, I'll not take any further questions that's outside of geopolitics. I agree, sir. No hate, and I appreciate that. Please feel free to believe whatever you believe. It's entirely up to you. I will not dispute your right to believe whatever you like. Some guy on the internet says, what are the geopolitical impacts of an Islamic US, Europe, Japan, as the illegal immigration to these countries is rising unchecked? Uh, Islamic US is a far-fetched scenario as of today, right? What's the Islamic population percentage of the US? 1%, 2%, 3%? I'm sure it's less than 3%. Shall we fact check that? What's the Islamic? Let's take some countries as an example, okay? Percentage of US Muslim population. Let's see. What's it say? 1.34%. Okay, 1.34%. So as you can see, it's very low. UK, what, 6%? That is 6 to 6.5%. Huge. France, let's say France must be 10% plus. Percentage, bro. 10%. Yeah. About 10% in 2023, 2019, 2020. That's France. You asked about, okay, Europe. What about Germany? Let's see. Germany was with 6, 7%, 10%. Yeah, there you have it. 6.1 to 6.7%. Japan must be very low right now, but it's rising because the Americans are pushing in certain flavors of immigrants into Japan now. Less than 1%, I'm sure. 0.2 to 0.3%, but it is increasing now. Yeah. So I think when it comes to Europe, it's possible that Europe could become Islamic in a few decades. Entirely possible. US, I would say at this point in time, it's very highly unlikely. Japan, right now it's a very small population, but if the Americans decide that we'll send in a few million Bangladeshis and a few million Pakistanis, then it may change very significantly, very fast. In Islamic Japan, well, if that happens, what's the geopolitical impact of that? Well, you could have the spread of Islam there, and that comes with geopolitical consequences, obviously. Islamic Europe, what could be the consequences of that? Well, it will be a different culture and it will have a different approach to geopolitics. The kind of approach various caliphates and all have had in the past, which is a very robust geopolitical approach, an approach of hegemony and conquest and that sort of thing. That could happen, right? So that's all down in the future. Maybe if it happens in Europe, it could happen in the next 30, 40 years, perhaps, that it becomes a significant Islamic population. And then Europe's entire nature, personality, everything will change, right? Uh, it could be like the days when Spain was an Islamic country, when the Moors, the North African Muslims, used to rule Spain. So Spain was at that time an expansionist. The Moorish Spain was an expansionist power which wanted to destroy France, subjugate France, and Islamize France as well, and then do the rest of and continue for the rest of Europe. Right? What about Ottoman Turkey? They also wanted to do the same thing from the east, go westwards and colonize the whole of Europe and Islamize Europe. So the same thing could happen if certain portions of Europe become Islamic officially or whatever it is, right? So that sort of thing could happen. Himanshu says, why exactly is the dollar powerful? Is it just the sheer power of the US that backs it? How does it work? Thank you. Okay. Currency is very powerful. I'll tell you why. So how did this happen? First of all, it all happened in 1944, 1945, the Bretton Woods Agreement. The US was very clear that it's going to now win the Second World War. Germany is on the way out. Japan will be defeated. We have the Manhattan Project going. So then a bunch of countries came together and accepted the American demand that the US dollar should become the world's reserve currency, which means that whenever you do transactions internationally, you do it in the US dollar. And the US dollar was backed with gold at the time. By 71, the gold backing was removed by Nixon, and it then became the petrodollar because the US controlled the global supply of petroleum, because it controlled the Middle East region, Saudi Arabia, all the major oil producing countries. Uh, so so there, and eventually the US dollar is no longer even dependent on oil. Now it's just a paper currency, with no intrinsic value of its own, but it is still the reserve currency because of US military might. The US, if any country decides to stop using the US dollar, there's going to be tremendous consequences, very bad consequences for that country. The US will sanction the country, it may launch a military invasion of the country, or it may disconnect the country from the global financial order. For example, what they did to Russia, they disconnected Russia from SWIFT. They froze all the Russian bank accounts. Whatever money the Russians had in various countries, various bank accounts was frozen, stolen, whatever. That's what they will do to you. So then, if the whole world is trading in the dollar, but you are no longer able to do it, it means you are cut off financially and economically from the rest of the world. You can't trade, because for trade you need a common accepted currency, right? So the Americans have created the situation where the only common accepted currency globally, internationally, is the US dollar. Now now the situation is changing. The Russians and the Japanese and the Russians and the Chinese, they have a ruble yuan trade. India, Russia, we have a rupee ruble trade. So there are countries that are now diversifying beyond the US dollar. Then the Americans also created a proxy currency, which was the euro, which also is a currency they control, right? So they gave the world an illusion of options, but it was essentially the same thing, because the euro is essentially the Deutschmark. It's a rebranded Deutschmark, and the Deutsche Bundesbank is controlled by the US, which has now become the European Bank or whatever it is, right? So at the end of the day, why is the dollar so powerful? Because the US is the sole superpower. It's the one hegemon that can intervene anywhere in the world at 60 minutes notice militarily. And that's what keeps the dollar the world's reserve currency, because everyone is afraid, right? If we stop using the US dollar, they're gonna smash us. That's why the sheer power, military power of the US backs the US dollar. There's no other reason for the world to use the US dollar. It has no intrinsic value anymore. It's just a piece of paper. They print dollars whenever they feel like, and that causes problems globally. But that's what it is. It is the sheer military might of the US that guarantees, that enforces the status that the US dollar has as the world's reserve currency. Satellite says, name all Indian vassals. Which Indian vassals? We are not a vassal nation. We are one of the five sovereign nations in the world. Which are the five sovereign nations? The US, Russia, China, India, and Israel. We aren't vassals. If you're talking about some historical issue, well, we're not discussing history right now. Pranay Kumar says Pakistan and Bangladesh made a choice. Do we destroy them? We can obviously destroy them, but what will be the consequences? Today, Pakistan is under US protection. Do you understand that? Bangladesh is also under US protection. Both East Pakistan and West Pakistan are today US assets, US vassals. And what is the deal in vassalhood? Let's say I am a small power and I am the vassal of my great emperor, the imperial power. What is the deal in vassalhood? It means I will do everything it takes to serve his interests, which can include sometimes selling off some parts of my country if required, or selling off my people. So I will victimize my people to ensure that the emperor is happy. But in exchange for that, whenever I am under threat, the emperor will come and save me because I am useful to him. So you think we can just like that, just destroy Pakistan and Bangladesh because we feel like? You think there'll be no consequences, sir? That's the point. You have to think deeper. My dear friends, please understand this. When you do an analysis of a geopolitical situation or a business situation or a life problem, please go beyond the surface level. Look at the surface level, what things look like on the surface, but then take the time, put in the effort to go deeper, one level deeper, second level deeper, third level deeper. Okay, Pakistan, enemy, very bad guy. But who are Pakistan's allies? Ask yourself this question: who is supporting Pakistan? And for what reason are they supporting Pakistan? And then, if you establish what that relationship is and why this great power is supporting Pakistan, then ask yourself, if you harm Pakistan, it will harm the great power's interest because Pakistan is a valuable asset. Then, will that great power not do something to stop it? Think about it. Wooden Armor PK says, how is it that countries like Thailand, Malaysia became first world so easily despite being much weaker economically and militarily, while India can't? When you are a smaller nation, it's way easier to implement reforms and make changes. Okay? It also depends on the kind of government you have. So let's say, take the example of Singapore, for example. Okay, we're talking about the same region in our neighborhood, east of India, Southeast Asia. In the Thailand, Malaysia neighborhood, you have Singapore also. In the 1950s, Singapore was a poverty ridden third world country. Small little place, small country, like a city state almost, completely abjectly poverty ridden. In 20 years, it became a first world country. Because of what factors? First of all, it had the right leadership. It had Lee Kuan Yew as the leader, as the benevolent dictator. It had the right form of government, a dictatorship, which means that whatever the dictator decides will be done quickly. There'll be no stupid opposition to come and say, no, we should not do this, we should not do that, human rights, blah, blah, environment, blah, blah, blah. The entire system of the government was aligned with Lee Kuan Yew. The judiciary, the executive, the military, the police, etc., 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 businesses, everybody did what they were told. So things happened fast, right? And he was a person with a vision. He may have been a dictator, but he was a benevolent dictator. He was an iron-fisted dictator, but his vision was that of a prosperous Singapore and a happy Singapore. And he enforced iron discipline. So that's how, in just one generation, just 20 years, Singapore went from a third world hellhole to a first world country. Right? Great example, Singapore. Now, Thailand, Malaysia are much larger than Singapore. But compared to India, they are much smaller. And if you look at the system of government, it is different from the system of government in India. Of course, if you look at it superficially, you'll say, no, but they also have parliament, they also have this. Please go beyond surface level analysis. And you will see that the reality is actually different. The truth is not always what you see at the surface level. Right? So that's why smaller countries can change faster. Smaller countries can reform faster. And if you can deal with issues like corruption and eradicate corruption like Singapore did, well, things become so much simpler. What is the meaning of the word corruption in the modern context? What does corruption mean? Huh? Do you know what corruption means? Can you define in one sentence what corruption means? What is the definition? What is it? What do you mean when you say that the system is corrupt? What does it mean when you say the system is corrupt? Or system is government system or whatever. When you say it is corrupt, what does it mean? It means that its stated function and purpose is X, but actually it does not do X, it does Y. Its stated function and purpose is to serve the people in the nation. But what it actually does, it serves somebody else. It serves a small number of people who are insiders, while claiming that we are working for the nation. That's the definition of corruption. When a system does not do what it's supposed to do, but does something else, which is detrimental to the cause it's supposed to serve. That's the meaning of corruption. So Singapore solved the problem of corruption. Other countries, they will be dealing with it in their own way. So when you have a gigantic country, India is gigantic. You may not realize how gigantic it is. Then, and especially when you are a democracy, a real chaotic democracy, then even the smallest change faces so much opposition and resistance, and that's why every little thing takes so long. Every small little action takes long. Even if it's good, you have to roll back sometimes. No, because these people are protesting. So we have to roll back the reforms and apologize. Sorry. That's what happens in a democracy. So you understand, they are smaller than India, all these nations. The Asian tigers, for example, smaller than India, militarily and economically much, let's say, weaker than India, but they were able to do things, get things done. Look at Vietnam, small nation. It's got like roughly twice the GDP per capita than India. Look at the streets, look at the civic sense and all. Look at how things are. Far better than India. Such a nice, much nicer place to live in. The quality of life is so much better. It's a communist country officially. Hmm? Why is it different? So there are so many factors that go into this. You see? And if you have a dictatorship like a communist country, you can get things done so much better and so much faster. You can get reforms done faster. So that's the deal. India has all these internal problems that prevent India from reforming and prevent India from doing anything fast. And that's why India remains mired in the third world problems. Right? This is by design. The system was designed to be like this from the very beginning. Essentially, since 1947, from before 1947, it was designed like this. You see, that's the deal. Ashish Karan says India alerting Pakistan over incoming floods. Thoughts? Very kind of us to do that. Very nice. And I wish our Pakistani friends all the best. I hope the floods don't hurt you too much. Mansak says, in our democracy, radical changes for the greater good fail as people vote out governments at the slightest discomfort. Is authoritarianism the only way forward for India? Look, why is the US such a great country? Now people consider China to be a great country as well. What do the two nations have in common? Why is Russia again becoming a great country? What do the three countries have in common? The US, China, and Russia. Authoritarianism. The US masquerades as a democracy, but it's an authoritarian regime. It's a police state. You take one step out of line, the cops will shoot you there. Everybody is strictly under control. Of course, some people these days are allowed to do things. You will always, some very smart, intelligent, well-informed people will say, no, but it is not like that. So and so people do all kinds of stuff in the US, and the cops don't take any action. Please understand that politics is a different story, and there are political reasons for that. But overall, in the US, you don't take a step out of line, the cops will shoot you. Right? It's an authoritarian country, rigidly authoritarian country. China, same thing. Russia, well, what do you think? Is Shri Putin, well, you could say many people call him a dictator. Well, if he is one, he is a benevolent dictator for his country, right? So if you have a democracy where everything has to be done, every decision has to be first arrived at by consensus, and then you have to take it to a vote, and then you have to see whether some special interest groups have a problem with that, who will go to some other authority who will come and step in your way, and there'll be a 17-year delay. If that's the kind of thing that is going to continue in India, nothing will change. And of course, if the government stops giving freebies to so and so category of people, and then they will vote the government out, then once again, the country will always come back to the lowest form of governance, the most mediocre level of governance. So if India wants to be great, well, then all you have to ask yourself is this. India used to be great. The past 1,000 years, we have not been great. We have had flashes of greatness. The Maratha Empire was a great empire. Right? We were great once again during the Maratha period. And before the Turkic invasions and occupation of India, we've reached great heights at various times. The Maurya Empire, the Gupta Empire, the Kushan Empire, great, glorious periods of our history. What worked at that time? And what was different from what we have today? Authoritarianism. Right? But not evil authoritarianism, benevolent authoritarianism, dharmic authoritarianism. Chatterjee says, well, you're very welcome, first of all, sir. Is the Indian Navy being a blue water navy, does it make any difference to Chinese Navy on geopolitical power projection? So the Indian Navy is indeed a blue water navy. What do we mean by a blue water navy? See, there are some navies, okay, in some countries, every country has some form of navy. But many countries have a navy that is essentially just a coast guard. It doesn't go into the deep oceans. It stays close to the coast. It just guards and patrols the coastline. Maybe five boats with some machine guns and some cannons or whatever. That's it. So that's not a blue water navy. That's a brown water navy. It's a coastal navy. It's a glorified coast guard. But when you have a nation, when you have a navy that has destroyers, that has frigates, that has aircraft carriers, that has submarines, that can go thousands of kilometers on a mission, well, that's a blue water navy, right? So India does have a blue water navy. Now, does it make any difference to the Chinese navy? Okay, let's for this we'll have to consult the map. So the Indian Navy is indeed a blue water navy. Does the Indian Navy have a complete dominance over the Indian Ocean region? Not really. So we don't have the numbers to totally dominate the entire region that we claim to be ours, the Indian Ocean region. Uh, for that, you would need hundreds of warships. We don't have that number, but we have sufficient numbers to be very powerful and very deadly closer to the coast. But we certainly can send warships on very long missions if required. So we are a blue water navy, but the numbers aren't that great. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what is the true measure of the power of a navy? Before I go to the map, what's the real measure of the power of a navy? How powerful is Navy X compared to Navy Y? How do you decide how powerful X is versus Y? Do we decide on the basis of how many ships you have? X has 20 ships, but Y has 30 ships, so Y is more powerful? No, not necessarily. X For X, who only has 20 ships, maybe each ship can carry 100 missiles. But Y, who has 30 ships, each ship can carry only 10, 20 missiles. So Y has 30 ships but 60 missiles deployed, and X has 20 ships but 200 missiles deployed. Can you see the difference in power? Those 20 ships will overwhelm those 30 ships. So the only measure of a navy's power, of its deadliness, is how many missiles can you deploy on any given day in total at sea. And the Chinese Navy has a vast advantage over India. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. And the Chinese Navy has vastly more ships than India. It dwarfs the Indian Navy. It is now numerically the largest navy in the world, the Chinese Navy. But why was I bringing out the map? It's because the Chinese Navy is stuck inside the island chains. The first island chain, which is Japan, Taiwan, all of that. The second island chain is the Philippines and all. And you have the Guam and all of that. So there are three island chains that the Chinese are constrained by. And they face all the US bases in Japan and South Korea, which means that a significant portion of the Chinese Navy has to be deployed in the Yellow Sea, in the East China Sea. Now they have created a whole new fracas in the South China Sea. So a lot of the Navy has to be stationed in the South China Sea as well. So because of that, they are not able to allocate significant naval resources for the Indian Ocean region. The you know this region over here, the Kalinga Sagar and the Sea of Saurashtra. They are not able to do that. They would love to, but all of the resources are tied up over here. But if, let's say, hypothetically, India decides to blockade the Strait of Malacca, the Chinese will send a whole armada of warships that will outnumber and outmatch the Indian Navy at this point in time. Okay? So being a blue water navy is wonderful, great, all that, and India can take on all challenges. That's true. But if it's a face down between the Indian and Chinese navies with full strength, no chance. So that's why I keep saying India needs to augment its naval might. We need to enhance our distributed lethality, not concentrate our lethality on a few gigantic warships. We need to have a large number of small to medium warships, some with long legs, some with short legs. Some of them can be big warships with very long legs, but we need to have a distributed set of assets of different kinds. We need to really have a large number of submarines, and we need to ensure that we can deploy several thousand missiles at sea on any given day, at any given point in time. That's what needs to happen. Ashish Karan says, Kra Isthmus land bridge project. What are my thoughts? Well, they've been talking about that for a very long time. See, what is the yeah? Let's talk about this. Sure, why not? Good, interesting topic. The Kra Isthmus, right? So the Chinese are worried about the Strait of Malacca because yeah, it's a choke point that can be choked off. Even the Indians can choke it off, and it'll be difficult for the Chinese to do something about it. The Chinese obviously has the naval might, but when you have a place like this, such a narrow strait, even your naval might may not be very effective, even if you have a larger and more powerful navy, depending on how the other navy is positioned and what strategies it uses in conjunction with the air force and whatnot. So the Strait of Malacca is kind of the Achilles heel for China. So the Chinese have proposed on many occasions to create a canal through Thailand. Where exactly is Kra? I don't remember where it is, but imagine this. See this long Thai peninsula that eventually becomes Malaysia. See, if you see here, this is Thailand, as you can see. Now, all this territory on the eastern side is Thailand, right? Thailand, Surat Thani is here, Nakhon Si Thammarat, Songkhla, Patani, all the way up to here, it is Thailand. And south of that, you have Malaysia. So this is a pretty narrow strip of land. So what if you just build a canal like the Suez Canal through this, let's say hypothetically here. What's the distance? It's about 70, 80 kilometers. It's definitely feasible from an engineering perspective. So that's the idea that's been around for quite some time, many decades actually. So the Chinese will finance this project, and it will help China gain an alternative to the Strait of Malacca. Interesting proposal. Will the Thai government agree to that? I'm not sure about that. But even if it is done, does it really give China an alternative to the Strait of Malacca? I mean, if the Indian Navy can blockade the Strait of Malacca, we can also blockade a canal here. It's not that difficult, right? So it doesn't really solve the problem, and that's the real issue with this land bridge. It's not just about having an extra passage, it's about bypassing a choke point. But by bypassing a choke point, you're creating a new choke point here. So, you see the issue there? That's the problem. Okay, Vamshi Kalem says, why did the British Empire in the 19th century allow the US to grow to eventually replace it in the 1920s? Why didn't they cripple the US like the US did to Japan and now to India? This may sound like a historical question, but it's very relevant to geopolitics. So let's take it. This is the geopolitical question. This is about geostrategy of that time, which is not that long ago. See, the British Empire in the 19th century, it had a quasi-global empire. The sun never set on the British Empire and so on. So why didn't they cripple the US? It's a valid question to ask. Why didn't the British take steps to cripple the US? The US that fought the British, defeated the British, and freed this entire continent. Why didn't the British then take steps to cripple the US? Because they would possibly eventually become a gigantic empire themselves, right? The US, which has now happened. So why didn't the British take any steps to cripple the US? To answer the question, you have to ask yourself this question. Were the British in any position to cripple the US? Did the British at the time, despite their global empire, have power projection capabilities in North America? Do you know how large North America is? Let's go to the map. Okay. The British Empire was all across the world. Egypt and the Gulf region, India, Burma, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and so much more, right? So much more. So much more. So it essentially never saw sunset. But the United States had this enormous territory, unlimited natural resources. And they had the beginnings of a pretty strong military. They could certainly defend themselves. And the British from here, they would have to cross the Atlantic, and to cripple the US, they would have to mount an invasion of the US. Did they have the resources, the means, the military might to mount an invasion of the US with its unlimited land and unlimited resources? Impossible. Impossible. Even if they wanted to cripple the US, they would not have succeeded. And the Americans, as they became more powerful, they imposed the Monroe Doctrine, that no European power will be allowed to meddle in the political affairs of either North America or South America. Absolutely nobody. And soon they started enforcing that with their military might. Initially, the British actually helped them. That's a whole different story. We'll not go into that. So that was the deal. So eventually, the British said that okay, they are our cousins, they are our own people, but now they're a different country, and let's have mutually beneficial relations with them. And they could see it that there's no way they can defeat them. There's no way they can cripple them. How do you cripple someone? If you want to cripple a country, you blockade the country, right? You deprive it of resources. You deprive it of resources, and you deprive it of communication with other countries. But the US was so gigantic. What will you deprive the US of? It has everything it needs. It's an autarky. Could not work, could not ever work. And that's the great advantage the US has. It is safeguarded by two oceans on two sides, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. It's almost impossible, conceivably, for anyone to invade the US. Impossible. That's the great advantage they have. So it was not possible for the British to do it, even if they wanted to. And they did not have the kind of power projection capabilities that the US has today. So once again, Mr. Independent Variable says, why didn't we prepare a backup in case the US left us? Backup of what kind? We have alternatives, right? We have Russia. We are talking to China again. So we have, you could say, options. We have options. We are not dependent on the US. Of course, we are technologically dependent on the US. We are technologically pretty dependent on the US in a variety of ways. So that needs to be done. That needs to be looked into. But overall, we are not dependent on the US. We have alternatives. We have excellent relations with Russia. We have excellent relations with France. We have excellent relations with various Gulf nations. We are again possibly going to have decentish relations with China, depending on how things go. So we are working on alternatives. It's not like we have no backup. Okay, understand that, please. Okay. Kaushal Thalapadi says, what do you make Pentagon paper of US retreating to Western Hemisphere come up with G2 kind of arrangement with China? Another question about a US retreat. So look, the US is not militarily retreating from Eurasia or from Eastern Asia. In Eurasia, they have the whole NATO framework, which is set up over there, and they're going to maintain their power projection and occupation capabilities in Europe. The same goes to South Korea, North Korea, South Korea and Japan. But the US is now beginning to reinforce its position in the Americas. So they want to ensure. So the steps they want to take is possibly do a regime change in Venezuela so that they can control all the oil reserves of Venezuela. Venezuela is the one nation in the region in South America that has refused to vassalize itself to the US. So the Americans may do something about that. And they want to essentially entrench their security position and posture in the Americas, because they are now concerned that China and Russia could possibly expand in the future. So let's first of all uh, secure our home base and home territories, and the territories we control closer to home. So I think the US is concerned. The world is changing. The US is no longer the dominant power it was 20 years ago. They had this unipolar moment where nobody could challenge them, but because they aided and abetted China and helped China rise, that's why they are in the situation today. So the world is different today. The world is more bipolar or multipolar than it was than the kind of unipolar world you had around 19 in the 1990s and 2000s. Very different. So the US is concerned, but it's not giving up its global hegemony and power projection capabilities anytime soon. But yes, G2 you mentioned, right? The US would love a G2 arrangement. See, the Americans would prefer a lot more a bipolar world than a multipolar world. A multipolar world is complicated. The Abrahamic mindset only understands binarity, the binary thing, right? Good versus bad, black versus white, that sort of thing. So they would like a binary world in which one part of the world, hopefully the larger part of the world, is ruled by the US, so which is the US and its vassals, and the other part will be China, Russia, and whoever is with them. So they want a G2 situation where the US and China will agree that now we are the only two enemies. You have your minions, I have my minions, and that's the game we play. Like the US and the USSR, they prefer that. But if you have like four different major powers, that's complicated, and they don't like that. They don't want it. So they would want actually it to be a G2 kind of world, a bipolar world. And for that, they want to make India their vassal, so that India can become part of part of their pool instead of being an independent player. So that's why they are going after India right now. Yeah, so that makes sense. See, it makes sense from this G2 perspective. MM says the Japanese Prime Minister has resigned. Arm twist by the US. Arm twist by US trade deal India. The Japanese Prime Minister, the news has come out, has resigned. And why has he resigned? He has resigned because of the humiliating trade agreement, trade deal that Japan was made to accept by the US. So the US will impose 15% tariffs on Japan, and Japan will impose lower tariffs on US goods. So there itself you don't have reciprocity. The US has the dominant hand and Japan is forced to swallow extra tariffs. But it's not enough. That isn't enough. That's not the entirety of the deal. Beyond that, Japan has been forced to agree to invest $550 billion in the US. Japanese money, $550 billion will be invested in the US, but not where Japan wants to invest it. Trump will tell Japan how to invest the money and where to invest the money, in what way. So it means that the money will be controlled by the US. It means that the Americans are going into Japan, they are putting their hands into Japan's pocket, taking out $550 billion, and they will take it and use it whichever way they want. Outright colonial behavior. Right? So essentially they're taking Japan's money and they will use whichever way they want. That's a great trade deal. It's a pleasure working for Donald Trump. See how easy things are. We can make anyone do whatever we want. India, bad boy. That sort of thing. So this is humiliating for Japan. This deal is an utter humiliation for Japan. And that's why the Prime Minister of Japan has resigned. But does it make any difference? No. The deal will continue. So some new person will come up as the Prime Minister of Japan, and that person will have to bear the humiliation and take it forward and operationalize the humiliation. That's the deal. And the US wants to do exactly the same to India. Maybe worse. Because India is not a US vassal right now. So the first step is that they will say, open up your market entirely. You will impose 0% tariffs on American goods and services. Open up your market entirely. Then, if you agree to that, we will maybe impose 15% tariffs on your goods to the US. Only 15% instead of 50 or 500. Right? So you take that humiliation. Once you do that, once India, let's say hypothetically, opens up the market, it will destroy all the Indian economies, Indian companies, the Indian manufacturing sector, because all the American goods will flow in and our manufacturers will be out of business. Then when India is fully economically dependent, they will say, now we want military bases in India. That will be the next step. So then slowly they will put up military bases in India, which will be controlled by the US, which will have American soldiers and personnel. Indians will be not allowed. And that's the beginning of the occupation of India, just like Japan was occupied. That's the deal. Colonial strategy, colonial desires. And it's not going to happen. So that's why they're so unhappy. Dev says China banned US apps, creating a gap. Shouldn't we do it too to achieve tech sovereignty, as we don't have resources like the US to innovate and replace them? And I'm not sure it'll work that way. See, we can ban Chinese apps, but US apps, if we ban them, then what will happen? How will Indians communicate with each other? We are used to communicating with each other any time of the day or night, right? Indians can communicate with each other, with themselves, whether you are in Shillong, whether you are in Tiruchirappalli, whether you are in Leh, whether you are in Port Blair in the Andamans. We communicate with each other on social media and various apps in real time. All of this is American apps. You ban that, the whole country is suddenly disconnected. What do you do then? You have to first create something to replace that. We need to have our own apps which are good enough to be able to replace US apps, not substandard apps that nobody likes to use, right? So there has to be a process, a series of steps to reach that the desired end goal. India needs to start creating its own platforms and apps, and these platforms and apps have to be world class, not substandard, right? So that's what needs to happen. Whether we have resources or not, we have enough money. Come on, we have enough money to create our own platforms and whatnot. You just need the will to do that. Teen Talks Dharma says Putin and Xi were talking about immortality by replacing their organs again and again. Is it possible by today's medical standards? Interesting perspective. Okay, I was not aware of this. Let's say a person wants to be immortal, but is it possible? See, after a certain age, organs fail, right? By the time you're 90 or if you reach 100, your organs are going to be in a very bad shape. And at some point in time, something will fail and you're done. That's it. End of story. But what if you just replace all the organs? That's a science fiction concept. There's a science fiction novel called The Gift from Earth by Larry Niven, in which this sort of concept is discussed. Anyway, I'll not go into science fiction right now. So let's say you have a person who wants to keep on living forever, but their organs are failing. The person is in the 90s. So what if you replace the heart, you replace the lungs, you replace the liver, the kidneys? Will that person live longer? Presumably, that person could live longer now. Their eyesight is failing. You replace the corneas or whatever, suddenly you have better eyes. But what if there is macular degeneration? Can you replace the retina? You can't. So eyesight may deteriorate. Then there's the question of the nervous system. Well, which is the major component of the nervous system? It's the brain. Can you replace the brain? The brain also will deteriorate, right? Why is it that people, when they're in the 70s, 80s, 90s, they become mentally less functional than they were in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s? Why is that? Even 60s? Because the brain tissue itself deteriorates, right? It's a very rare case where you have a 90-year-old who's as sharp as he or she was in their 50s or 40s. Very, very rare. Generally, people become slower. So you can potentially, possibly ensure that you live longer than usual by replacing all the major important organs: the lungs, the liver, the heart, the kidneys, or whatever else, maybe even the corneas. But what do you do about this? The brain. The brain will deteriorate. That's the real problem. So up to a certain extent, you can keep the body alive. Maybe 120 years, maybe who knows, maybe possibly longer. Possibly. If we take these weird extreme measures of replacing all the major organs. But then you will have to give a cocktail of anti those suppressant drugs that suppress the immune system, right? Because your body will try to reject the foreign transplanted organs because they came from a different body and it's a foreign organism in your body now. That's how the immune system sees that. So you have to give immunosuppressant drugs for the rest of the life. And when you're in your advanced stage and you're given and you're taking immunosuppressant drugs, it can cause infections and things which you can't replace the immune system, right? So there are all these complications. Very interesting. To a certain extent, you can do it, but the main question is, what about the brain? Can't replace the brain. Arun says that I believe the first enemy we have is self-loathing Indians. They always say the worst in India. They say, yeah, that capital, where even though it's one of the lowest in the world per capita, when India overtook Japan in economy, per capita matters. Yeah. And how do we solve this problem? Why are so many Indians self-loathing? Are they bad people? I promise you, most Indians are nice people. You meet them face to face, person to person, they'll be nice people. They'll treat you well. They'll be polite, courteous, all of that. But they will have this mindset of inferiority. And they'll hate everything about Indian culture. They will not, most of them will not be bad persons. So why do they have this mindset? Ask yourself this. It's because our system brainwashes this into people. The education system creates self-loathing people. Your your teachers, your education system. I'm not saying all your teachers are bad. Some are gems. Sometimes you meet really good teachers, but overall, the average standard is very low. And that's why when you are taught this nonsense over and over again from the time you were 3 years old, it will be a miracle if you're not self-loathing by the time you're 22, 23. The system has to be reformed, but who's going to do it? That's the problem. I don't blame those people. These are our people. It's not their fault that they have this self-loathing inferiority complex in them. It's not their fault. This was done to them by the system. If they had passed through a better education system, they would not have any self-loathing. Right? They are just trained to see the worst of India in everything. This good thing happened, but look at the per capita GDP. We are now number 4 economy, but look at the per capita GDP, sub-Saharan Africa. They will always see the worst in every situation. Why are they like this? Because they've been indoctrinated, they've been trained, they've been brainwashed, and they can't overcome the brainwashing. It is not their fault. It's just tragic that the situation exists. The biggest problem, I agree with you, Arun, the biggest problem is this inferiority complex, the self-loathing. But we have to address what causes this instead of addressing the people who are suffering from it. Of course, there also something should be done to maybe make them see a different perspective. We can all try. But the real solution to the problem is to reform the system that causes this. You see? Who's going to bite the bullet? Who's going to bell the cat? Who's going to throw more cliches? Mullerine says, we need this government for India's strong foreign policy and growth. Sadly, many mock foreign trips as a waste of taxpayers' money in the name of local issues. Is this narrow-mindedness of India? This is just another example of the same inferiority complex. And it's so easy for Indians to be misled by maybe the media, maybe by some politicians, possibly, hypothetically, right? Indian government officials they have legitimate reasons to go on foreign trips for diplomatic reasons, for trade talks, for a variety of things. It is important, it is vital, it's essential for India that these trips happen. You will see so many foreign delegates, officials, ministers, etc., coming to India all the time. I mean, if you see the schedule in Delhi, you will see there are foreign visits all the time. Are they also wasting their taxpayer money? It's not the case. I'll tell you what the real problem is. The central government, when its officials are going across the world and engaging with various countries, they are doing it for the national interest. But it is possible that hypothetically in some states, it is hypothetically possible that maybe in X state or Y state, perhaps potentially, some MLA delegations may have gone on a foreign trip, hypothetically, and use the taxpayer money to go on these hypothetical foreign trips and done nothing and just use it as a sightseeing visit. And hypothetically, it may be happening a lot hypothetically. So when you have this hypothetical situation where there's a pattern of hypothetical politicians doing this all the time, then it is natural for Indians who have been seeing this hypothetically for decades to be suspicious of all foreign trips. So can we blame Indians for that? Even when you have an honest government, hypothetically, who is doing the trips for the right purposes, Indians are used to seeing this horrible thing, and they will naturally see it the same way. So I understand why many genuine people are very skeptical of all of this, and that's why it's so easy to mislead them by the very people who have been doing this. Right? It's not narrow-mindedness of Indians. Yeah, maybe it's not. See, when you are suffering from something for such a long time, and when something different happens here, you will tend to not see it differently, right? Because it's your taxpayer money that's being wasted hypothetically like this for decades by these people. So you will naturally see it that way. It is very difficult for most people to differentiate that this was the wrong thing, but these people are doing for the right reasons. It's very hard to understand that. So that's why many people mock foreign trips. especially those with self-loathing and inferiority complex and all that. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Ritvik Yaduvanshi says, "What leverage does Israel have over the US?" Well, what leverage does Israel have over the US? It is said that there is a very powerful Jewish lobby in the US. I am not saying this. Professor John Mearsheimer has written Mearsheimer. He's written a whole book about this, about the Israel lobby in the US or something. So, according to that thesis, there's a very powerful Israeli lobby in the US. A lot of very powerful Jewish politicians, business people, etc., who who advocate for better relations with Israel and for a relationship that is very pro-Israel. So maybe that's one of the reasons why the US has consistently had a very strongly pro-Israel policy. The 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 stance in the US is that Israel is our number one ally. We will never do anything that will be detrimental to Israel's interests. That's been the policy of the US for, I would say, many years, right? Is it because of leverage, or is it because a lot of very prominent, powerful, rich Jewish people are in powerful positions in the US and they lobby for Israel? That could be a contributing factor, perhaps. So, Professor John Mearsheimer has written this book about the Israel lobby in the US that kind of seeks to explain why Israel is given this very preferential treatment by the US government. Whichever US government is in power, they still give very preferential treatment to Israel. Maybe that explains it. Polarize says, but it is believed that European families have money and it's managed by these BlackRock types, and Soros types are front faces. Um, that's possible. That's possible. Yeah, sure. But what's the question? Soros types could be the front of the thing. Maybe it's just the face. Maybe Soros is just the face of something much bigger, much more powerful. It's possible, yes. But do I have evidence of that? Do I have evidence of it? Do I have proof that I can show you that, yeah, you are right? Soros is just a puppet. He's just a figurehead. And so and so and so and so, so and so, so and so people have the real money and the real power, and they are using him as a puppet. Do I have any evidence to prove it? I don't, right? So that's why I will not speak about it, because I have no evidence. Khajoro Bitterthorn says, would Pakistan betray their old daddy to please the one who spoils them more? If the US asks for terrorist attack in Xinjiang, would they facilitate? What would each side gain or lose if this happened? The US will never ask for a terrorist attack in Xinjiang. The US is a sensible country. They understand what games are to be played and what games are to be avoided. The US is not going to test Pakistan's loyalty by asking them to commit suicide. You understand? Pakistan is not to be used as a tool against China. The purpose of Pakistan is that it can be used as a tool to offset and counterbalance India and to bleed India on demand and keep an eye on Iran. And Pakistan can be a useful way to get information about China. Pakistan will never be used to launch terrorist attacks on China. The US is a very sensible country. They know exactly in what ways to use which asset. Asking Pakistan to launch a terrorist attack in Xinjiang is asking Pakistan to commit suicide. Won't happen, right? Doesn't make any sense. General Subutai says, uh, "Are we seeing the US doing what UK did in Manipur? Illegal immigrants pattern is the same long consequence." Okay, are you talking about what's happening in Manipur, or are you talking about what's happening in the UK? I think you're talking about what's happening in Manipur. So, what did the UK do in Manipur? What did the British do in Manipur? See, Manipur was under Burmese occupation for 7 years, horrible Burmese occupation, in the first quarter of the 19th century. Because the previous king was super focused on cultural enrichment, on developing this beautiful Manipuri culture that we have today, right? The Vaishnava culture. But he kind of messed up his succession. So when he died, his sons fought each other for the throne, and The security of the kingdom was completely neglected, so the Burmese stepped in and they conquered Manipur. And Burma and Manipur, the two kingdoms, have had long issues going back centuries. Any two neighbors have that. So the Burmese took the opportunity and occupied Manipur and devastated Manipur for 7 years. Then, well, then the British somehow enter the picture. I'll not go into the whole history; it'll take a long time. Then the British come into the picture, and they essentially say that we will guarantee Manipur's security. We will uh, we will facilitate the Treaty of Yandabo between Manipur and Burma, the two kingdoms, which will, and the guarantor of the treaty will be Britain. And that was the process of the vassalization of Manipur as well as Burma. Essentially, it took decades to happen, but that was the beginning of the process. So then, in the kingdom of Manipur, it was required that the king of Manipur should have a British political officer in the court. And that was the beginning of the interference. And eventually, in 1891, there's the Anglo-Manipuri War, in which the Manipuris were defeated, and Manipur was then physically occupied. And to punish the Manipuris, the Meiteis, for daring to fight the British started settling foreign tribals into Manipuri territory. Cookies, who are now called Cookies. So even in 1900, the Cookie population of Manipur was less than 1%, probably. I don't remember the exact figures. I may be wrong about this, but it was a very small percentage. But by 1949, it was significantly larger. And the British confined the Meiteis to 7% of the land of their own kingdom. And they settled all these outsiders all across other parts of Manipur, mainly the southern and eastern parts of Manipur. So they ghettoized the Meiteis, punished them brutally, brought in foreigners, and that's where the Cookie problem starts. They are foreigners, they're not Indians. And after 1949, when Manipur became part of India, the Indian government, the Nehruvian government, did what the British did, because the British were always right. So they allowed more and more Cookies to come into Manipur. And in the past decade, I don't know how many lakhs have come in, because the border is open, right? That's the situation. Now, how did suddenly this huge flood of Cookies come into Manipur in the last 10 years or so? Well, somebody is pushing them in, and that's where the issue is, right? So if you want to destabilize a country, take the border states and flood them with illegal immigrants, especially those whose culture is opposed to yours, those who don't have any allegiance to your country or its culture or its civilization, who are enemies essentially. So yeah, so this is a spillover of the civil war in Burma. The Burmese government, the Burmese military government, is not in control of the whole of the country. It's a proxy war going on between the US and China in Burma. And behind this could be rare earths. And of course, if this has a bad spillover effect on India, well, even better. You're killing two birds with one stone. If the US will see it that way. So that is Project K, Cookie Land for Christ, a creation of artificial Christian nation, Cookie nation, out of parts of Burma, Manipur, Mizoram, and parts of Bangladesh as well. Now Bangladesh is exempt because Bangladesh is now a US vassal. So Bangladeshi territory will not be taken. But they want to create a de facto Cookie ruled region in Manipur and Mizoram, and also parts of Burma, right? So that is what's being done. So yeah, it's a continuation of what the British tried and executed and achieved. Inferno JES says, hypothetically, if India cancels the H1B, can the US give those key resources citizenship to protect its techno-economic interests as a counter move? It will be hard to sell that to the American population. See, who are Trump's core voter group? It's the MAGA Americans. Make America great again. They hate brownies. They hate brown people like us. They hate Indians. They're super racist. Many of them. Not all, but many of them are super racist. And Trump is failing. And he wants to blame his failures on India. Ukraine hasn't happened. No ceasefire has happened because it's New Delhi's war. Modi is fighting the war apparently now. And that's why Trump has failed. It is Modi who has prevented Trump from doing a ceasefire apparently. So blame everything on India. If the US economy is not doing well, blame Indians. These Indians, these H1B people, they come and take our jobs. And that's why Americans don't have jobs. Blame everything on Indians. Now let's say India cancels the H1B visa program and requires that all H-1B visa holding Indians need to come back to India within, let's say, 7 days or 15 days. That will be a disaster for the US tech industry. It will cripple the tech sector. It will cripple Fortune 500 companies. So what does the US do? Then does the Trump regime do a U-turn and say, no, 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 we need these H-1B guys? How do they do it? Right? How do they sell it to their public? So it will be a very difficult position that Trump will be in if India does this, cancels unilaterally the H-1B program and asks everybody to come back. If Trump says that, okay, I'll give them all citizenships or green cards, then he will have to face the wrath of his people. That's the problem Trump will face if India takes this step. Sergeant Skyland says, I'm surprised by how much India is getting covered in the international news. So what is really the alternative to the US market for now? Yeah, see, today the problem for the West is that India is impossible to ignore now. It's the fourth largest economy in the world. In a few months, it will be the third largest economy. How do you ignore a nation like that? You may not like that nation. You may hate them. But how do you ignore them? That's the problem. So that's why there's a lot of coverage. Most of the coverage is negative, of course. Right? But the coverage is there. Earlier, India was never mentioned. Now they have to mention India. And Trump is doing a very public blaming of India for everything. Right? So that's why there's so much coverage in the international news, but most of it is negative. Now, what's the alternative to the US market? So right now, look, if you look at the cumulative trade between India and the US, it's about 90 or $100 billion, roughly, give or take something. That's not a lot of trade. We are not exporting a lot to the US. So if the market is off limits to us suddenly for whatever reason, it should not be very hard to find alternatives. Why can't we manufacture products for Russia, for the EU? Why can't we do it for other countries? So what are the alternatives? One is the Russian market. One is the European market. The European market is bigger than the Russian market. It has deeper pockets, so EU. But if the US arm twists the EU into no longer trading with India, then what does India do? Then there's Russia. China is not a market that needs imports. It's an export-driven market. They have an overcapacity for manufacturing. So China is no longer, even if there's good relations with China, still, what do we export to China? China has everything. So then the solution is to become a consumption-driven economy. Lower taxes for the citizens so that they can consume more, they can buy more. So we produce, we manufacture, and our own people consume. That's another alternative. For that, India, the Indian middle class, all the classes will need deeper pockets. So that will need a lot of reforms. That's a great opportunity to do deep reforms in India. Daily, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're almost at 2 hours, so I'm going to stop soon. Mil says, Europeans say Russians are modern Mongols who want and are ready to overrun the whole of EU, but also many say they are losing and falling and failing in Ukraine. What are my thoughts? Yeah, this is Schrodinger's Russia. It is winning and losing at the same time. It is dangerous and helpless at the same time. It can destroy the whole of Europe, but it is also being defeated by Ukraine at the same time. Decide one, right? Decide what the truth is. They say that the Russians are not Europeans. They're not whites. They're Asiatics. They're Mongols or whatever, Tatars, whatever. That's the situation. What are my thoughts? Russia is winning the Ukraine war. The war is going exactly the way they want. I don't think Russia has any intention of overrunning Europe. I don't think so. But if you want to augment the military might of NATO, you have to claim that Russia is preparing to overrun Europe. That way you can justify higher spending for NATO, to militarize NATO more, to militarize Poland more, for example. Right? So I don't see Russia failing. I don't see that the war is going badly for Russia. The war is going exactly the way Russia wants. Russia is getting stronger. Its economy is getting stronger. Its industry is getting stronger. One issue it's facing is that it is very much aligned with China, which is not a comfortable position for Russia. It is, to some extent, a little more dependent on China than they would like to be. So that's why they would like to have India rising more. So that is where we are right now. Saswat Jinnah says, what would the US do if Japan tries to revolt? They will crush the revolt through military force. And they will not need to send a military across the Pacific Ocean to Japan. The US military is already placed in Japan. They can crush any revolt brutally. Virinchi Verma, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. AVM says, as India rises, it will be even harder to control demographic changes within. How do we reconcile to be a civilizational superpower? As India rises, it will be harder to control demographic changes within. I think as India rises and becomes a more powerful military and economic power, whoever is at the helm of India will be in more of a position to prevent foreign interference in Indian demographics. As India gets more powerful, it will be easier to control foreign demographic interference in India. It'll get easier, not harder. The more powerful you are, the larger you are economically, the more powerful you are militarily, the more control you have internally, and the more you can prevent outsiders from interfering. So it's going to be the opposite thing. Right now, India is a weak country comparatively. That's why we still have all these billions of dollars flowing into India for industrial scale conversion activities and various other such efforts and projects that are going on in India. By the time we become a $10 trillion economy, we'll be able to stop that. Right now, we are too weak to stop that, apparently. Right? So that's how you become a civilizational superpower, by rising economically and militarily. That way, you have more strength to control what's happening within, and you can take tougher action within, stronger, harder action within, to counter and block whatever forces may exist that are trying to mess with the demography of India and culture of India and civilization of India. Disha Prasti says, the Japanese Prime Minister has resigned. What are my thoughts on the reason? The Japanese Prime Minister has resigned because Japan has been humiliated by the US. What humiliation, you ask, right? The Americans have forced a very unequal and humiliating trade deal on Japan. They're going to impose 15% tariffs on Japan. I think Japan is going to impose a lower tariff rate on the US. I don't remember if it was 10% or something, but there's going to be a gap. So the US will have heavier tariffs in Japan, but Japan will have lighter tariffs in the US. So it's already unequal there. It's already humiliating here, because any trade agreement has to be reciprocal. It has to be balanced, but this is an imbalance already. But that's not the end of the story. Japan additionally will invest $550 billion in America. So that money will be taken out of Japan's pocket. It will be invested in America. How will it be invested? So since it's Japanese money, Japan should decide, right, which industries, which companies to invest in. No. Donald Trump will decide. So you understand what happens. Donald Trump is going to take his hand, put it in Japan's pocket, pull out $550 billion, and decide how that money will be used. I mean, can you imagine more humiliation than this? That is why I'm glad he only resigned. The Japanese have other traditions. When there is a situation of humiliation, they do something else. I'm glad he has only resigned. So now somebody else will be the prime minister, and that unfortunate person will have to operationalize. This humiliation and take it to its logical conclusion. So that's why Dishaji, the Japanese prime minister, has resigned. Ritvik says, explain in brief who are Methi, who are the Meitei, Naga, who are the Kuki, who are the actual outsiders, what has Myanmar to do with all of this, what is our geopolitical relation with Myanmar, how will it affect our future? Okay, let me try and explain in very brief. We know a state called Manipur. It's got a very old history. It's got a chronicle of kings, written chronicle of kings that goes back 2000 years, at least, maybe 4000 years. Very ancient tradition and history Manipur has had as a kingdom, right? They have their own system of writing, they have their own language, the Manipuri language, all of that. And they have all these kings, a whole lineage of kings of the Ningthoja dynasty. Now, ask yourself this question, simple, and you can fact check it yourself. Don't rely on me. The Manipuri language that everyone knows, which ethnic group is the originator of the Manipuri language? Is it the Kukis? Is it the Nagas? Is it the Meiteis? It is the Meiteis. This language is more than 2000 years old. Manipuri dance. It's one of the most beautiful classical dances of India, right? Which ethnic group is the originator of the Manipuri dance? Is it the Nagas? Is it Meiteis? Or is it the Kukis? It is the Meiteis, not the Kukis, not the Nagas. Manipuri language, Meiteis, not the Kukis, not the Nagas, right? And if you look at the kings of Manipur, more than at least 2000 years of recorded kings we have of Manipur. What ethnic group did these kings belong to? Naga, Kuki, Meitei. All of them were Meitei. So Manipur is Meitei. The Meiteis are the true Manipuris, and the Nagas also. See, the Naga term was superimposed by the British. In Manipur, the kingdom, which was much larger than what it is today, you had the major group was the Meiteis, and you had all these other clans and tribes who lived in the hilly parts of Manipur. They all had different tribal names. The Paite, the Angami, the Mao, the Tangkhul, and so on. These are all different tribal groups, and they all have different languages. Some of these languages are not even mutually intelligible. But the British Christianized them all and put them into one category, Nagas. Okay? So the Nagas, the people who are called Nagas, are also indigenous to Manipur. And they are closely related ethnically to the Meiteis. Okay? The Kukis are the foreigners. They are the outsiders. They came from somewhere in Yunnan or something a few centuries ago. They are even not even indigenous to Burma. They are foreigners even in Burma. They don't speak the Burmese language. They don't practice Burmese culture. They don't respect Burmese culture. They don't owe any allegiance to Burma or its culture or its civilization. Understand this, please. Okay? Even these basic facts, people are being misled about by various factions in the Indian media and various Indian influencers and who knows what else. Let's be very clear about these facts. Please fact check what I just said. Look it up. Even, okay, Wikipedia now may be lying about this possibly, but do proper fact checking from primary sources. Look at British records themselves, okay? Best source is British records. In 1900, what was the Kuki population of Manipur? Must be 1% at best. Today, the Kukis are possibly a majority now. What happened? What happened? It was all artificially engineered. Okay, so understand who the natives of Manipur are. It is the Meiteis and the Nagas. The Kukis are foreigners. They're not Indians. Today, they may have Aadhaar cards and whatnot. Even Bangladeshis are given Aadhaar cards now. Okay? It doesn't mean that they're Indians. What's our geopolitical relation with Myanmar? How will it affect our future? India has neglected Myanmar for decades. India neglected all foreign affairs except for Pakistan for decades after 1947. Now our relationship with Myanmar is decent. We are on decent terms with the Myanmar government, but for so many decades, because India was indifferent towards Myanmar made stronger relations with China. And China seeks Myanmar's resources like rare earths and all that. And the Americans want that now. That's why there's a civil war there. And that's not the only reason for the civil war. The Americans want a regime change in Myanmar so that they can put a puppet government there and use that to destabilize India. Just like Bangladesh and East Pakistan, West Pakistan. That's the deal. Okay, Ritvik Yadhuvanshi says, was it a strategic failure of Russia to sell Alaska to the US in pennies since it's so packed with natural resources? In the 19th century, when the sale happened, neither the Russians nor the Americans knew that there was something called natural resources in Alaska. The Americans considered this purchase of Alaska to be stupidity. They mocked the American president of the time who agreed to the sale and who purchased the land. The American media and the American public mocked the American president. It was just wilderness, forests and bears and salmon fish and whatnot. Nothing. It's only later that all the oil and gas and other mineral resources were discovered. The Russians also had no idea. And for Russia, it was just too far. Just too far. How far can you go from Moscow further and further and further east? You're going to cross the Bering Strait now, and they also had Alaska. It did not make sense at that time for Russia to hold on to Alaska. If they knew what was there the way we know today, they would have not given it up, right? So it was not a strategic failure. From using the best information they had at the time, they said it makes sense to sell it off to the Americans. We don't need it. So I would not blame them for it. Pratap VGM says China's cities are very closer. China's cities are very closer NCMP to Indian Y. Let me try and understand what's being asked. China cities are very closer and CMP to Indian Y. Are they close to each other in comparison to Indian cities? What are you asking, sir? I'm very sorry. I'm not able to understand exactly what you're asking here. China cities are very closer in comparison to Indian. I'm sorry. I really apologize. I would love to answer your question, but I'm not able to get it. I apologize, sir. I really apologize. Could not understand. Okay. Jaipreet Singh says, these deadly catastrophic events we are facing every year, what can we do about it? I think we need a dedicated ministry for natural disasters. You mean the flash floods and all of that? Maybe we should have a dedicated ministry for natural disasters. What can we do about it? I'm not sure. Can we predict some catastrophic cloud burst somewhere? Can we predict earthquakes? It's almost next to impossible to do that. So all you can do is to be in a state of ever-present readiness. So maybe we should have in every state a task force, a disaster relief. I think we have a national disaster relief force, but does every state have one? Does every state have one located within the state itself? Maybe we can do that. So there are some states where natural disasters are more frequent compared to other states. Some states are more prone to earthquakes. States near the Himalayan belt. So you can have something specific to those states stationed there. So things like these could be done. If you look at Odisha, you have cyclones every year. If you look at Assam, you have floods every year. And so on. Yeah. So depending on each state and its and the threats it faces, natural threats it faces, I think every state can have some contingency measures always ready. That sort of thing we can do. But can we predict earthquakes? Can we predict cloud burst, freak cloud event? I think it's very hard to do that unless we have a network of radars, weather radars all over the country, in every district essentially, which is very expensive. It's a little uh, unlikely to happen. So I would say that's what we could do. Abhinav Kulkarni says, what the hell is happening in UK? Absolute social fallout. You mean the immigration thing? Well, they engineered this themselves, right? So what can you say? They're gonna pay the price for it. Eisen says, what was the difference between ancient Chinese and Bharatiya in selecting the bureaucrats? While we know Chinese and Koreans conducted these massive exams for the official posts in the imperial court, the Indian system and the Chinese system were very different. The Chinese, you are absolutely right. They had these bureaucratic exams. Every year there would be an exam in which students from all over the country will come, and they'll have prepared a lot for that. And their great deal, the great dream for the students was to become a high-ranking bureaucrat in the Chinese government machinery. So they would have these exams, and the ones who would pass the exams would go on to become bureaucrats. That's how it was done in China until the Chinese civil war and revolution destroyed everything. In Bharat, in the Bharatiya system, every king had a council of ministers, and the council of ministers was chosen from the people who were essentially part of the education system, the wise people. So the Indian education system was completely decentralized. It was at the grassroots level. It was a temple based education system. Every town, every village would have a temple. Every temple you would have the local priests, let's say priest, would not just be a person who does prayer, but also he would be a teacher who would teach children the basics of mathematics and grammar and itihasas and history and all that, the basic stuff, right? And then you would have higher level schools, which were the Mahaviharas and all that. And then you also have the Vishwavidyalayas, which is the great universities, and you would have gurukuls and all that. So every royal family will have its own gurukul for its own princes and princesses, right? That sort of thing. So typically, the council of ministers would be chosen from these gurukuls, from the Vishwavidyalayas, and also from the commanders and various ministers who the king himself would appoint. So it was a different system from the Chinese system, and we don't quite have the details as to what was the selection procedure. I think the Arthashastra gives a good idea to a certain extent of the kind of system that you had and the procedures you would have to appoint officials at various levels. So every Indian empire that was successful and grew to a great extent, each of these empires had a very sophisticated governance system in which all of these things were taken care of in extremely careful manner. Even non-imperial powers like the Satvahanas. So the Satvahanas are considered to be a kingdom, not an empire, because they did not rule the whole of the subcontinent. But even they had a very sophisticated system of governance in which the best officials would be selected and there would be processes for that. But we have kind of lost how it was done because of the destruction of our libraries, right? So, right, I inadvertently took a history question, and if some people are offended by that, I apologize. I should not have done that, but yeah, when I see a question, I just take it. I am supposed to take geopolitics questions today, so in case someone is upset, I apologize. Okay, Dhruv says Turkey's rise in drones, steel dome defense, influence in Caucasus, North Africa, and Arab world coupled with rising religiosity looks like Ottoman geopolitics is returning, as European outlets predict. Do you see it that way? Yeah, Turkey is become is see. First of all, understand Turkey is not a fully sovereign power because it's part of NATO. It's a member of NATO. There are people on Twitter who will say that no, Turkey is one of the sovereign nations. I completely disagree. Turkey is a member of NATO, which means that Turkey's armed forces or some part of Turkey's armed forces will at some point in time, given the circumstances, come under the command of a non-Turkish commander. That way, it means that you are not militarily sovereign. Secondly, Turkey has US nuclear weapons on its soil, which are pointed at Russia. And they don't control these nuclear weapons or the personnel. Once again, lack of military sovereignty. So Turkey is not sovereign, but they have imperial ambitions. Yes, Erdogan has it. And that's why they have become a major producer of drones and missiles and all that. Sure. And with US consent, they are playing geopolitical games in North Africa, in Syria, and all that. Now, Syria will stop because the Americans have a new vassal in Syria, a terrorist who is now president, right? So Erdogan has this big dream of recreating the Ottoman Caliphate, that sort of thing. But the question is, who comes after Erdogan? Will that person be as capable as Erdogan? Will he or she have the same political agenda, or will that be engineered and something else will be made to happen, like the Americans often do? So I think it's still early to say. It's a little too early to say that Turkey is going the Ottoman Empire way once again. It's a long way away from that. Ritvik Yaduvanshi says, will Pakistan and Bangladesh get more Trump admin support if Operation Sindoor 2 starts, since India resisted US tariffs? How will it affect the region? See, if Operation Sindoor 2 starts, it will be against Pakistan, not Bangladesh. But the US may incite Bangladesh to create trouble on India's eastern border. Very possible. Um, and if Operation Sindoor 2 starts, which is another war with Pakistan, it is highly likely that the Pakistanis will get material support from the US. Very likely. So I think the Americans have gone fully on the Pakistani side. If there is a resumption of hostilities, they will take the Pakistani side. It's almost a given now. And you may have seen that there are American strategic heavy lift aircraft, uh, cargo aircraft that have been visiting Pakistani air bases. The Noor Khan air base, like 2 days ago, and ostensibly it's to deliver flood relief or whatever disaster relief supplies, but you don't send high ranking generals to deliver supplies, right? So they may be already sending some military equipment to Pakistan at this point in time. So yeah, it looks like that. Shivansh says, if you just had to, who would you choose, US or China? I would choose neither. I will choose India. Aryan Kapoor says, why is PM Modi soft on the US and Trump, despite the tough stance on India? And what are India's short, medium, and 100% and long term goals for India? How is PM Modi soft on the US? How? Because he tweeted something nice and polite diplomatically. Is that why he's soft? Is that the reason why you think that he's soft? Is it so? Because Mr. Modi recently tweeted that yes, Mr. Trump, India and US should be friends, and we want to have excellent relations with the US. Is that why you said that he is soft? So, if you are a viewer of this channel, you should know that there is a gigantic difference between words and actions. The US wants India to cave in and become a vassal in very specific ways. Open up your economy, impose 0% tariffs on American goods, open up your agricultural sector, open up your dairy sector. And if we do that, our dairy industries will be destroyed, our farmers will be crippled, and our manufacturing sector will die. And we will be completely dependent on American imports. Mr. Modi has refused to do that. Do you call that being soft on the US, sir? It's the opposite of that. What are India's short, medium, and long term goals on this? Sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty. Short term, remain sovereign, resist all pressure. Medium term, grow the economy to $5-6 trillion. Long term goals, make it a $50 trillion economy. India should rise to its natural position in the world, which is the world's largest economy. That's what our goals are. Vaibhav Shinde says, how can we get POK and Aksai Chin back? Is it possible without any warning or battle? I think Indians should, right now, for the next several years, forget about POK and Aksai Chin. Work on growing the economy. Everybody should work as hard as possible. India will automatically get POK Aksai Chin back once we are at a certain stage, when we are at a certain economic size. 10, 15 trillion. By the time we are a $10 trillion economy, it will be very hard for Pakistan to withstand India. By the time we are a $15 trillion economy, POK will automatically come back into our lap without a battle. And once we overtake China, even Aksai Chin and everything else, we'll see about that. My point is, we don't want to fight for these things. We want these things to come back automatically. For that, we have to become a very powerful economy. So let's stop this obsession with POK, Aksai Chin. Let's just work on the economy. And because when the economy grows, the military strength also grows. All right? All right. Ankitaji, thank you so much. Very kind of you, ma'am. Thank you. Shivansh says, lakhs of jobs in Bangalore and Gurugram, GGN, at stake if the US bans tech. Are we gambling them for a few oil billions that aren't even cheaper for the common people? See, I completely understand why you're asking this. So the impression has been created that the Americans are upset with India because we are buying Russian oil. Because we are getting Russian oil slightly cheaper than maybe Saudi oil or whatever. So if Saudi oil is $80 a barrel, we are getting Russian oil for $75 a barrel. What is the deal with this $5? Stop buying Russian oil, do what the Americans say, and everything will be fine. That is what many analysts want us to believe. And because we are being so obstinate and we are still saying, no, we will buy Russian oil. That's why the tariffs have been levied on India, 50%. And that's why lakhs of jobs are at stake. They are at risk now. And Indian companies are also at risk of going out of business. All because Mr. Modi is being stubborn. That's what you are being told. Let me explain what the Americans really want. And some people are saying that Modi only has to accept that Trump mediated the ceasefire with Pakistan. And Modi just has to nominate Trump for a Nobel Prize. That's all we have to do, and all the troubles will go away. That's what we are being told by many Indian analysts, many YouTubers, influencers, and so on. What's the truth? What is the truth? I'll tell you what the US wants. There were all these rounds of trade negotiations, right, between India and the US, and a trade deal did not happen. even though India was prepared to make many concessions. Why did the trade deal not happen? Do you know why? The Americans said, you need to drop all tariffs on American imports. You need to impose 0% tariffs on American imports. That's number one. Number two, you have to open up your agricultural sector for US imports, which means that you should import American agricultural products in India at 0% tariff. That will immediately kill India's agricultural sector. Third, open up your dairy sector to American products at 0% tariffs. That will kill India's Amul, Sumul dairy, all other dairies. It will kill everything. So if you think that a few lakh jobs are at stake because of the 50% tariffs now, if India accepts the American demands, entire industries will be wiped out. Do you understand this, sir? So once again, I implore you, my dear viewers, I implore you, I beg you, please don't restrict yourself to surface level analysis. Please dig deeper at what the truth is really, the truth really is. Don't rely on people's opinions. Do the analysis yourself. Please do this. Okay, Pratap. Okay, we are at almost 2.5 hours. Okay, I'm going to stop very soon now. Please stop taking super chats. I'm going to end this very soon. Pratap says Chinese cities are. This is what he's asking. I'm sorry I did not get it the first time. I apologize. Chinese cities are much cleaner compared to India. Why? I answered this because. Okay, let me answer it. You may have come in later. I understand. Why are Chinese cities cleaner to India compared to India? Because China is an authoritarian nation. It's a dictatorship. Everything in China is controlled from Beijing. And Beijing is concerned about the image of China. Now, in India, I promise you that the guy in Delhi, the man himself, is concerned about the image of India. But he's not a dictator. He can't tell the municipal corporation of X city or Y city that if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to have you shot. Right? He can't do that. So the municipal corporation in X city or Y city will continue hypothetically indulging in corruption, neglecting living standards, neglecting garbage collection, neglecting beautification, neglecting all of that. All the budget of the municipal corporation, hypothetically, much of it will be swallowed by the corruption. And all the roads which are dug up every year and created every year, hypothetically, they will be done using substandard materials and all. The same cycle continues every year. Because India is not an authoritarian nation. Because New Delhi cannot put a gun on an official's head and say that get it done or else. Do you understand why it is like this? Let's not blame it on the Indian people. It's the Indian system. R says or makes AI impossible to scale it to human level. All right, sir. This is a geopolitics session, so I will talk geopolitics today. Maybe in a science session we can discuss this. It's an interesting point you're raising here. A clause in effect says, how do the many tribal populations in India connect to the broader population in terms of culture and language? Their deities seem to be local to them. Well, once again, this kind of is connected to geopolitics because it is at the heart of the Western efforts to create fissures and divisions in India by targeting the tribals, by targeting these people and telling them that you are separate and you have been oppressed for thousands of years. See, India is a very ancient civilization. And there was a pivotal event several thousand years ago in India. Several thousand years ago in India, there was a pivotal event which you could say was an inflection point in our civilizational history. That pivotal event was the Battle of the Ten Kings, in which King Sudas, standing alone, defeated a coalition of more than 10 clans and exiled them out of India. And then that was the Vedic age, the Rig Vedic age, where we used to do yagnas and offer havans to the gods and all that. And the gods of the Vedic age were Indra and the pantheon of gods that surrounds Indra. Now there are so many communities in India who have all these local gods, right? They worship a hill, they worship a set of trees, they worship some ancestor who is a god to them. So A social civilizational contract was done at this time after the victory of King Sudas. And the contract was that every god is welcome at the sacrificial fire, the Havan fire. They are all our gods. Every god is welcome. It's not just Indra and the other gods that are in the pantheon around Indra. Every god of every community in India is welcome at the fire, at the Yagna fire. They're all our gods. I think that explains everything you need to know about India and our culture and our civilization. That social contract happened several thousands of years ago. The Rig Veda is the world's oldest known literature. It was written closer to 6000 BC than to 1500 BC. So that's our civilization, and we are all the same people. And all gods are welcome. They're all our gods. Gil Gurvinder says, "What's the current status of BRICS? Is it moving somewhere or just lost here and there? Is it relation between India and China improving nowadays?" The current status of BRICS is kind of here and there. We don't have a common BRICS currency. We have a BRICS bank for sure. We have problems between the three main nations: India, China, Russia. Not India and Russia, but China, Russia, China, India. Now, if those can be figured out and fixed, then BRICS can actually go somewhere. Thus far, BRICS isn't that consequential. It's consequential in the sense that it's a coalition of nations that are non-Western, not necessarily anti-Western, but non-Western, and the cumulative GDP put together is bigger than G7. So that itself makes BRICS somewhat consequential. But if the three main players RIC get their act together, BRICS can become a whole different beast. So it all depends on how things go between India and China to a large extent. Also China and Russia. China and Russia are still okay. Russia is very uncomfortable with the Chinese dominance right now, but it is what it is. So if India and China can somehow find a way to coexist without any major issues and resolve the major problems that we have, then BRICS could become something entirely different, and it could become a real challenge to the West, the Western hegemony. Jazz Singh says, "What if China tries to invade through Uttarakhand? What will happen because it is not spoken about a lot? Media doesn't talk about Uttarakhand." Look, the media will focus on whatever gets the TRPs. Whatever is most sensational, the media will talk about that. I'm sure the armed forces are not the media, right? The media will focus wherever they feel is right to focus. The armed forces are professionals in charge of the safety and security and territorial integrity of India. And they will look at every square kilometer of India and all the potential places from which a hypothetical invasion, if it ever happens, could possibly happen from. So it doesn't matter if the media doesn't speak about it. The media doesn't defend the country. The military does. And I assure you, the military has everything under control. Siddharth says, "Why do Indian cities look uglier than in some war-torn countries like Iraq, Libya, Syria, etc., even Congo, and like roads, basic infrastructure?" I think I answered this question just a while ago. Let me re-answer it. Compare with China. Forget about, yes, sure, Congo, all that. China is a dictatorship. It's an autocracy. In China, the government, Xi Jinping, is concerned. He cares about the appearance of China. He cares about the image of China. And therefore, if any municipal corporation in some small city in China or medium city in China, if they indulge in corruption and they neglect living standards and they neglect beautification and the appearance of the city, the members of the municipal corporation, something terrible will happen to them legally. Death sentence, which is executed within 30 minutes. That's why China is taken care of very well. Cities are beautified. Roads are perfect, flat, no flaws. There's no garbage littering around. Because there are consequences for these things. In India, if a hypothetical municipal corporation neglects all these things, are there any consequences? There is your answer why it is like this. R says China's 40 to 60% GDP is fake by nightlight analysis. That's what many economic analysts say. Maybe it's true. I am not an economic analyst, so I can't say. It's possible for sure. Mr. Independent Variable says the US can replace Indian H1B with other countries easily. Well, good for them. All the best, sir. Shravan says, what is the geopolitical relevance of letting IDF soldiers do a soft takeoff over of India Tibet border areas of Himachal and Kasol and Uttarakhand? I am not aware of this. I am not aware of this, so I won't be able to answer this. IDF, Israel Defense Forces, really? So if like I said, I'm not aware. I'll have to look into this if it's the case. Yeah. Apurva Aditya Jha says, long time viewer, appreciate your work. Thank you so much, Apurva ji. I really appreciate your message and your contribution. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Shivansh says, why does the government have such high tariffs on graphic cards when they are the backbone of building LLMs? We anyways don't have any local manufacturers anyways. Maybe the government should look into this. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, we need to have local manufacturers too. But as long as we don't have those, I think, yeah, then the tariffs should not be that high. I think the government, either it has a real good reason for it or maybe they need to look into it. So I'm glad that you are raising this point, sir. Ajhuro Bitterthorn says, what utility does Russia's one and only vassal Belarus provide? What do they get in return? Belarus gets the security of the US, of the Russian military umbrella and nuclear umbrella. It gets economic aid. Its president gets the benevolent support and ashirwad of President Trump that you can stay president as long as you want. I'll take care of you. And Belarus also gets to station Russian nuclear warheads in forward locations, which will also safeguard Belarus from a potential NATO advance in the future. So you see, it's kind of a win-win thing. So Belarus, for that, has to kind of subjugate itself to Moscow. It is not entirely sovereign, obviously, but the Belarusian people and the Russian people are the same ethnicity. So it doesn't really matter. Putin uh, is not going to oppress the people of Belarus. He's not going to treat them like second-class citizens. They are treated just like Russian citizens. They are treated with respect and with an equal status. So I think it's a win-win relationship, and so it works on multiple levels in this manner. We Virinchivarma. I'm sorry, it's an unusual name. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Cause and Effect says, what are your thoughts on automation and AI in international policy making through an economic lens? Automation and AI in international policy making through an economic lens. Well, automation and an AI in international policy. Automation and AI is not in the domain of international policy making. The fact that automation and AI has entered so many sectors, that affects the kind of policies nations can make, especially those nations that have AI and automation. So if you are the US and you are talking about the year 2005, then your policy will be different because you do not have AI or that level of automation at your disposal. But now that you have AI and you have automation, you can factor all of that into your policies, international policies, military policies. So let's say AI. So now, if you want to do, let's say you want to contain Russia, and you're worried about the kind of response patterns Russia may have, you can war game all of that through AI. And you can then take a call based on the various scenarios AI gives you with probability percentages potentially. If you have seen my geostrategy series, I give forecasts with probability percentages. Well, AI will give you a frightfully sophisticated version of that, of what I do manually, right? So it's gonna give you very, very detailed scenarios with detailed probability percentages, and the AI can give you 20 scenarios if you want, and then you can take the top three, and base your policy on that. So how to deal with China in so and so sector, or how to deal with the South China Sea dispute in so and so thing, or whatever, right? But we're talking about the strategic lens here, economic lens. Well, AI can give you economic forecasts also. You can look at the major Fortune 500 companies in, let's say, China, and based on their their performance in the past 5 years or 10 years. AI can model their future performance. It can do it on a sector by sector basis, industry by industry basis, company by company basis, and it can give you very detailed forecasts based on possibly classified information also, which can help you forecast what China is gonna what China's economic position is gonna be like in so and so quarter, so and so year, and that way you can formulate your international policy towards China from the economic perspective using the leverage of AI and so on. And automation, well, that has more effect on the military, especially because you can automate drones, you can automate so many things, but you can also automate industries entirely. So all of these things come together and create this effect. Dr. Harshavardhan More says C-17 Globemaster in Pakistan. Any speculations? So this aircraft, C-17 Globemaster, it's an American aircraft. It visited the Pakistani Noor Khan Air Base, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, and they are claiming that they were delivering some relief materials for the floods or whatever has happened in Pakistan. But if you are sending relief materials, you will not send a high-ranking general with the relief materials, right? So most likely they're supplying some weapons systems to Pakistan, or maybe they are evacuating nuclear warheads from Pakistan. So if a C-17 appears empty, then maybe it's going to take something back. So most likely, like I've been saying, the so-called Pakistani nuclear weapons are most likely American nuclear warheads on loan to Pakistan. And if some of these warheads were hit during Operation Sindoor and there was radiation leakage and whatever, the Pakistanis will not know how to deal with that. So Americans will have to contain that. Maybe they'll take some materials back or whatever. Maybe some warheads back. I'm not sure, but yeah, there are all these possibilities. Okay, let us take one last question for today. This has been a very long episode, almost 3 hours. Tarun says, how did Afghanistan defeat two superpowers, US and USSR? As noted by CIA as graveyard of empires, even British, what is the future geopolitics of the region? Afghanistan did not defeat the USA. Why do people believe the Afghans defeated the USA? The US was in complete control of Afghanistan. They handed Afghanistan to the Taliban on a silver plate. Ye lijiye, le lo. But not for free. There was a whole set of negotiations, Doha, right? And the Doha Accord between the US and Taliban has secret clauses which no one knows. So it was a negotiated agreement, and the Americans handed over the country to the Taliban on a silver platter. Afghanistan did not defeat the USA. The USSR, who defeated the USSR in Afghanistan? It was the US with the help of the ISI and the Pakistani terrorists. The Afghans did not defeat the USSR. It was American weapons, American ammunition, American supported terrorists and mujahideen that defeated the USSR. Please, let's not fall prey to all these illusions. Okay? It's not that easy to defeat a superpower. It's impossible. All right. We are done for the day. Almost 2 hours, 45 minutes. All right. It's been a long session. Okay, I'm going to end it over here. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions. This was fun. I know Amisha is saying I look tired. I do 8-hour sessions, But anyway. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. This was fun. And we'll do this once again next week. Please keep learning, keep asking questions. If you have the inclination, please read my books. If you do read my books, which are available on Amazon Kindle, please leave some honest reviews. It will really help me. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you. Even if you don't buy anything, I don't care. Perfectly happy. Thank you so much for everything. And I'll see you in the next live stream. Take care. Keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep raising your standards. Keep improving. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.